Welcome to my channel. This is the audiobook, Accompanying the Phoenix. Chapter 11. The youth's eyes narrowed, about to open his mouth to speak. Suddenly, the Imperial bodyguard moved and blocked him with his body. "Sir, be careful. This miscreant isn't easy to deal with." However, the Crown Prince still didn't calm down, beckoning his aide, Fu Xing, to him. Hearing what the Crown Prince had said, he sneered. "Right now, there are 7 princes, and all of them have the capability to inherit the throne. You punk, how can you be a king?" Shen Li laughed, but her smile was cold. "You want to rule this era? You are too reckless." Brandishing her spear, she waved it once and only a gleam of silver could be seen before everybody felt their belts loosening. A loud clang of a sword sounded as one dropped to the ground, and with the clang, also sounded everybody's belts and underpants falling. Everybody rushed in panic, desperately pulling up their pants. Shen Li's lips hooked up into a smile, but before it could spread, a pair of warm hands covered her eyes. Behind her, Xingyan sighed, "Don't look, too dirty." For a moment, Shen Li was so shocked by the warm hand covering her eyes that she had even forgotten to scold him to let go. Not caring that she had just turned several men naked, Xingyan still had always looked at her as a girl under his care. As a real woman. When everybody realized what happened, they all picked up their swords hurriedly, hobbling back awkwardly whilst holding up their pants. However, Fu Xing's belt seemed to be a bit different as he had no hint of embarrassment on his face, but instead an expression of pondering. His eyes stared at Shen Li for a moment, before ultimately deciding not to say a thing and went with the others. Now, there was only Shen Li and Xingyan, 2 inside the flames and charcoal remains of the house. Shen Li put away her silver spear, but did not touch Xingyan's hand. Her eyelashes brushed against his palm as she said, "Let's go. I'll send you to Prince Rui's residence. Then it's time to leave." "Okay." Xingyan agreed, his tone a little high. He let go of Shen Li and watched the burning flames. "Wait a bit." Shen Li turned her head to the side to look at Xingyan. The raging fire was reflected in his pupils. His lips had a rare frown on it. She suddenly remembered what Xingyan said to Rui Wang yesterday. He said that he wanted to stay in his small courtyard because it was his home, but now it was being destroyed, swallowed up in the raging flames. His mood, how could it be good? Shen Li's fists tightened. If she could, she would have definitely made the Crown Prince pay. But if she were to use more of her powers, then in but a few days, the pursuers would have definitely come to kill her. She cannot continue to stay here. Shen Li gazed into the fire, slowly burning the courtyard to ashes. She knows that her time here has come to an end, but her heart has never felt so reluctant to leave. In the end, what to do? "I don't know how long it'll burn." In Shen Li's somber silence, Xingyan suddenly muttered to himself. "This way, I can't know if the fish in the pond is still edible, raising so many, what a waste." "Why you? You were actually just thinking about that?" "Otherwise, what else would I be thinking?" Shen Li took a deep breath and grabbed Xingyan by his collar and moved. The garden in Prince Rui's palace was silent. Suddenly, there was a flash of silver light, and 2 figures abruptly appeared in the garden. Xingyan walked as he glanced at the moonlight above them and sighed. Moving thousands of miles with magic really is far more convenient, but why did you have to choose this inhabited garden? Do you think I want to come here? Shen Li shot back. "This is because I cannot locate Prince Rui's bedroom." Xingyan smiled. "It's still your job to find him." He moved forward to step out of the small garden, but Shen Li grabbed his wrist. "Don't you see the strange thing here?" "What's strange?" His ears couldn't hear anything but the chirping of insects, and his eyes could only see the shadows of the trees against the moonlight. It looked no different from any other night. Shen Li waved her hands and caught something tiny. During the day, I didn't even see it. Why would Prince Rui want to raise so many unformed demon spirits? Xing Yan raised his eyebrow, releasing his wrist while Shen Li wasn't paying attention. He walked out of the pavilion, and in the silence, he spread out his arms. Walking 2 steps forward, he turned to Shen Li and confidently said, "There is no malice. I cannot see the so-called demon spirit, but I can determine the atmosphere." "Shen Li, you worry too much." However, it wasn't that Shen Li was worrying too much, but rather, because Xing Yan could not see what was happening. Here, the power of heaven and earth was overwhelming in balls of light, resembling clouds of fireflies within a beautiful, midsummer night. In the moonlit garden it illuminated every corner. He did not know that, when he walked forward and spread open his arms, he was like a mortal so magnificent, to even be able to receive the admirations of the gods themselves as he embraced the dazzling light. It was so bright that Shen Li even had to squint her eyes, countless thoughts running in her head. This man, who had awoken her from the nightmare. This man, who opened his umbrella to protect her from the drizzling rain. This man, who rested as pockets of sun fell on him through the grapevines. One who could make her feel so at ease, this kind of man. "Come." 2 steps away, Xing Yan held out his hand. "If you are afraid, I'll hold you." He to her, he really sees her as a woman. She cannot look, cannot look. Shen Li grabbed his palm forcefully and pulled him, making him stagger 2 steps forward. Before he could recover, Shen Li roughly hit him and pulled his robe. Xing Yan had an almost dazed look. "Why did you? Did you forget who was standing in front of you?" Xing Yan froze for a long time before letting out a helpless smile. "Yes, mighty Shen Li. I didn't mean to look down on you. You listen well, I want to tell you something." Shen Li didn't bother listening to Xing Yan, just staring at him sternly. "I'm about to fall for you." The crickets chirp. Shen Li's words were the only things spoken in the silence, sticking in Xing Yan's ears. After a while, he simply grinned. "Okay, got it, let's go." Was he just having fun with her? Such a perfunctory answer, so perfunctory, he probably didn't even have time to even consider the matter. Ah. And that smile. Why would he be smiling, AI? Even more ridiculous, was that he was completely complacent and just disregarded her words. The hand that's roughly pinning Xing Yan's robe shook with fury. But before she could explode with anger, her nose twitched, a faint smell floating in the air. Instantly, her body no longer held the feeling of anger, but rather, was taut and alert. Magic particles. It's very light, but definitely cannot be taken lightly. Shen Li released Xing Yan's robes from her grasp and turned to look at the sky. The night sky was filled with little demon spirits, hindering her vision. She could only tell that the smell vaguely came from the southeast. But when she tried to pinpoint it again, the magical particles was nowhere to be seen. Shen Li's eyebrows knitted slightly, the magic particles. She could tell that they were different from the demon realms, but she couldn't recognize it. As she was pondering, the atmosphere changed. The originally bright young demon spirits that were crowding around Xing Yan had all frozen in the air, dead still. Shen Li got a bad feeling and hurriedly hauled Xing Yan behind her as her whole body spilled out waves of power. With a loud echo, all the surrounding spirits were pushed away only to see the group just float into the sky aimlessly. Slowly, the demon spirits began to tremble violently. One by one, they all gradually turned into a blood-red color from the inside out. What happened? Xing Yan asked, slightly surprising Shen Li. It seemed that he too has sensed the change. Shen Li just shook her head. To put it simply, it isn't a good thing. We need to leave this garden and find Prince Rui. If Prince Rui were to know of this, then Xingyan really would have no place to stay. Shen Li barely finished her sentence, before a horrifying scream of a woman sounded throughout the night sky. The cry was mournful, filled with countless resentment and hate. The demon spirits in the air, too, seemed to be affected by the screaming. Their trembling bodies intensified, and some of them even started letting out small crying noises similar to a child's. The sounds echoed within the dark night. Xingyan's brows wrinkled slightly. Let's get out of here. Even he has heard the noise? Then. Shen Li waved a hand, magical power sweeping forward. It cut straight through the demon spirits, sweeping away out of the garden. She dragged Xingyan with her as she walked out of the garden, conveniently hearing Prince Rui's men as they shouted one after another into the air. Monsters! Help me! When she stepped out of the fenced garden with Xingyan in tow, Shen Li felt shocked by her surroundings. Prince Rui's home was filled with young demon spirits, all the color of blood, everywhere. They were all crying and acting similar to a newborn baby, blood-red tears streaming down their faces. Some crawled on the floor, others on the walls, and many of them were even clutching to people as they all kept sobbing. However, their bloody tears were equivalent to dangerous acids, causing burns to mar the skin. The servants were all in a panic, running chaotically through the residence. Torches lit up the night, but whenever the tears made contact with the torch, fiery light exploded, so dazzling that even Shen Li had to close her eyes. It was similar to the nightmarish illusion from earlier, scaring Shen Li through the depths of her heart. Xingyan knitted his brows, Shen Li muttered. A demon spirit has bitten back against its owner. He couldn't raise the demon spirit. I need to quickly find Prince Rui. A demon spirit is very difficult to obtain. Even out of tens of millions of young demon spirits, only one talented spirit can achieve a conscious human body and become a complete demon spirit. Others, even if you were to hand-raise it day and night, year by year, the most it would be able to achieve is a soulless vessel, unable to cultivate or learn. Within Rui Wang's palace, there is only one that is able to cultivate into a human body, the young lotus Miss. However, on the day of the encounter, her heart did not hold any resentment. But now, it's so high that she even tried to kill the prince. How could this? Shen Li suddenly recalled how the magical particle suddenly disappeared, and her expression turned grave. Shen Li. Xingyan suddenly called out to her and pointed southeast to a small road. Prince Rui's residence is right over there. Shen Li looked up at the southeast corner. However, instead of seeing a house, the only thing that was visible was a crowd of glowing red spirits. Welcome to my channel. This is the audiobook, Accompanying the Phoenix. Chapter 12. Shen Li looked up at the southeast corner. However, instead of seeing a house, the only thing that was visible was a crowd of glowing red spirits. The residence was covered, as if the bloody baby demon spirits were trying to bite a hole though. Shen Li's heart shook, and she turned to look at Xingyan. Originally, she was going to let him just wait here, but the immature demons were already crawling their way towards them. Finally, she just gnashed her teeth and took his hand in a tight grip. No matter what, don't wander more than 3 steps from me. Xingyan just smiled. With such a grip, how could I? His world suddenly went dark. When he opened his eyes again, he was in a blood-soaked room. But despite its current appearance, if one looked closely, they could see that it used to be a grand and beautiful area. The blood within the room dripped from the demon spirit's tears, toxic and extremely harmful. In a short moment of carelessness, a drop fell onto him and pain racked his body. It was so intense that it reached and engraved itself within his heart. Xingyan's hand was smoldering, smoke blowing up from it. All that remained was a round, but deep hole in his hand. However, Xingyan did not let out a sound, leaving Shen Li oblivious as she continued to scout around. Finally, Shen Li managed to find a secret door behind the bookcase. It was open, leading out into a dark room. Shen Li brought her other hand up and unfurled it, revealing a bright flame in the hollow of her palm as she walked ahead, pulling along Xingyan. Every step she took was careful. Ah! A scream. Within the narrow passageway, the cry was even more piercing, making Shen Li's heart feel ever tighter. If Prince Rui died then. Using the fire blazing in her palm to lead the way, Shen Li and Xingyan finally reached the exit of the escape tunnel, leading into a spacious room. A candle light flickered behind the screen. The two had yet to have even enter, but they could already hear the small lotus miss's mournful crying. Zhu Qingjin. Neither you or her can live any further. You all must die. Rushing into the room, Shen Li kicked the screen that was blocking their sight out of the way. The young lotus miss's long black hair was disordered and messy, young demon spirits floating around her. Prince Rui's hand was grasping a 3-foot-long cyan-colored sword as he defended a bed, lips bloody. This bed, he was willing to risk his life to protect, laid a woman. Her face was pale as she lied still, eyes closed as if she had slept for many years. When Shen Li and Xingyan suddenly broke into the room, the young lotus missus was surprised, her blood-red eyes staring at the two. Her lips moved. Those who obstruct me, die. Her magical qi reappeared and converged into the shape of a knife. With the young missus's shout, it split through the air, aiming to kill Shen Li and Xingyan. Shen Li moved to block in front of Xingyan, her hand waved out. It was as if the magical qi had hit an invisible barrier that it could not pierce through as it diffused back into the air. However, her resentment was still very strong and converged into a mist and trapped Shen Li. The hatred was so strong that Shen Li frowned. Rather than how you are now, I really do love your happy, innocent blushing manner much more. If you don't calm down and change back to normal now, I will no longer give you the chance. As soon as she finished her words, a red tasseled, silver long spear suddenly materialized in the palm of her hand. Waving, it reappeared in her grasp as she charged at the young miss, striking at the heart. Before she could finish her action, a hoarse voice suddenly interrupted her. Prince Rui. Do not hurt her. His voice was extremely rough, but his intention was clear. If there was indeed no hatred even in such a state, then Shen Li was completely convinced that Rui Wang must have really loved the young lotus miss even in such a dire situation, he could still not bear to hurt her one bit. Do not hurt me? When the young lotus miss heard this, the laugh that came out of her throat was similar to crying. Zhu Qingjin. Zhu Qingjin. Are you merciful or cruel? Her voice was raised, her whole body radiating even more hostility. In that case, all of you can die together. The ground trembled. It roared out a loud boom as rock collapsed, blocking off the exit to the outside. Shen Li's heart sunk outside. There were thousands upon hundreds of incomplete demon spirits, all surrounding the house that can destroy everybody outside. Over here, they would have normally been safe. However, this is a narrow channel. If the exit is sealed, it is tantamount to burying all the people here alive. Not a small amount. When all the air here is exhausted, everybody here would have suffocated to death. Always guarding her, now you can die together. The young missus's figure gradually became faint, and I will destroy your whole Rui palace. Shen Li's body flashed, stepping forward to seize her. outside, the demon spirits are affected by the young lotus miss. If this time we can kill her, all the other ones outside would lose their hostility. However, this time Shen Li had forgotten that she was still clutching onto Xingyan's hand, who was tying her down. Before she could let go and chase her, the young missus had already dissipated. Shen Li gnashed her teeth and angrily threw off Xingyan's hand before turning to glare at him. Xingyan had an innocent look on his face as she glared at him, waiting for him to speak. Finally, Xingyan sighed, "You're stronger, with such a tight grip, how could I break free of your grasp?" Shen Li choked and forced her feelings down, turning to stare at Prince Rue. His expression was very sullen, and his complexion was pale. Shen Li did not bother to ask him why and just got straight to the point. "I'll send you two out first, and then you two return back with the guards to carry this girl out." "Out of question." "Cannot." The two men both opened their mouths and denied Shen Li's order. Prince Rue turned to look at Xingyan inquiringly, a somber look on his face. Finally, Xingyan sighed. "I can make a soul-condensing array here." He turned to look at the woman on the bed. "If we leave her now, she may not survive." Hearing this remark, Shen Li glared angrily at Prince Rue. "Speak. What's wrong with her?" At this time, Prince Rue had long collapsed by the bedside and had no energy to rebuke Shen Li for her disrespectful attitude. He kept silent and only looked at the woman on the bed before his hoarse voice rang out. "This is my wife, the Rue princess. 3 years ago, we were out on a walk when we got attacked by an assassination squad. My face had gotten damaged, but she had protected me, all the knives entering her body. She saved me from the assassination, but she had fallen off of a cliff. I found her body at the bottom of the cliff, so I brought her back and kept her here, waiting for the day she opens her eyes again." Shen Li frowned. "If you were just waiting for her, then why would you house a demon spirit? Now, it even holds so much resentment towards you, how come?" Prince Rue kept silent for a while, before finally speaking hoarsely. "When I brought her back here, the only thing I could think of was her dead body. It gave me indescribable sorrow, because I know that Yishur, such a woman, couldn't have died so easily. I studied the path of immortals and finally found 2 ways to awaken her." Before he could even finish, Shen Li already knew of the 2 ways he had found. To either continue to extend her life with a fate-changing array, and to raise a complete demon spirit to feed to her. One life for another life. Shen Li sneered, ruthlessly exposing him. "You did not protect your wife properly, and had let her die for your sake 3 years ago. Now, you can't accept the reality, and delusionally wishes for her to live again. Therefore, you sought for an immoral method and went against the flow of heaven to raise a demon spirit hand by hand, only to trade hers for your wife's. Really such a cheap guy, huh?" The prince kept silent. "That is what I'll do, if it wakes Yishur up." Shen Li's eyes narrowed. If it wasn't for the fact that Xingyan would have nowhere else to go, then she really would have preferred to just go, leaving this selfish prince to just deal with it all himself. Now why did the young lotus miss turn out to be like this? Prince Rue shook his head. "I come here every night to visit my wife, but somehow, Small Lotus had actually broken in here for some reason. She didn't understand these matters, so her heart gave birth to resentment." "Of course she'll resent you." Shen Li spoke. "A demon spirit's temper is very stubborn. She regards you as someone very dear to her, but you would actually kill her for another life. If she didn't hate you, then something would have been wrong with her brain." Not to mention, Shen Li turned her gaze to the woman on the bed. She felt that no more words were needed. The little lotus miss had always loved Prince Rue, but it turned out that all along, the only one the prince cared for was his princess. Just then, the ground shook once more. Shen Li still did not know how well the outer pavilions were faring. Shen Li pondered before speaking to Prince Rui. I don't care about what happens before, but right now, we are in this mess because of you. Since you can't make up your mind, I'll just do this how I want to. When I find the Lotus Miss, if I cannot get rid of her power, I will kill her. Prince Rui's expression was cold as he observed Shen Li, listen to her clear voice. Keep in mind that if the young Lotus Miss dies, and people connect it with your dead wife, that it was I, Shen Li, who killed her and no one else was involved. Xingyan suddenly turned to observe Shen Li, their eyes meeting. Shen Li quickly turned her head, her vision leaving Xingyan. Shen Li involuntarily grabbed Xingyan's wrist and spoke, right now the tunnel is blocked. The baby blood demon spirits cannot come in, but air is limited and can't sustain us for long. Around this time outside, it should be a massive panic. I can bring Xingyan and myself to go back in the throne room to avoid the baby demon spirits. Let the common people leave the palace, then we can search for the young Lotus Miss. Xingyan didn't know what to say, and just nodded and agreed. Where, in this moment, Shen Li was still mindful of Xingyan, her mouth constantly muttering incantations as their landscape changed. The horizon had already become translucent and the sun was about to rise, bringing light and weakening the bloody demon spirits severely. But even so, the Rui Palace was in a disastrous state from the raging last night. The bodies of the slaves, maidservants, and guards were all crumpled up under the baby demon spirits, clothes and flesh burned off by the acidic tears. A very gruesome and nauseous sight. But even if Shen Li saw a corpse that looked disturbingly similar to a butchered pig, she would just summon her silver long spear and brandish it. Sending out waves of killing intent, she simply swept it out of her way as she spoke to Xingyan. Take advantage of the sun to deal with the little bloody demon spirits with your array. If they are contained first, the people of Rui Palace can escape safely. Xingyan froze up for a moment, before forcing out a bitter smile. Do you really think arrays are so easy to make? I don't even know Rui Palace's layout, how could I make one? Shen Li felt surprised for a moment. If that's the case, then why didn't you say so in the cavern? If deal with the young Lotus Miss right now, you would have no use. Xingyan coughed twice, I didn't hear you say anything earlier. You didn't hear at all, what's wrong with your head, ah? Shen Li struggled to suppress her anger, in such a busy time, he added more chaos. If this was in her military barracks, then she would have had people to pull and whip this stupid soldier. She had originally planned to have just dropped Xingyan off at the Rui Palace then go her separate ways, but in the end, how long has this simple situation been? She only stays here for a moment, yet so much danger has occurred. If her pursuers come and add to the mix as well, this situation would not be solved with a few mere houses collapsing. As Shen Li continued to think about how to end this situation, the tip of her nose caught a whiff of more magical qi, a familiar one causing her heart to tighten. She looked towards the horizon, but the smell is closer now. However, she was relieved. It was only one person, and what's more, is that she is very familiar with this purse. Emo Fong. Emo Fong. She shouted towards the sky, a black ball of magical qi suddenly falling near her. Shen Li rushed to it, the thick, black qi dispersing to reveal Emo Fong, dressed in thin, black robes. He fell onto one knee, bowing his hand respectfully into a salute. King. Ever since Emo Fong had devised a method for her to escape to marriage, Shen Li had always felt grateful to him in her heart, even though she had been forced through inhumane treatments afterwards. However, Emo Fong's loyalty wasn't weak-willed. She patted his back and helped him up, but Emo Fong refused. Rather, he bent his other knee and sank into a deep kowtow. The other day had injured the king. Mo Fong had committed a crime worth 1,000 deaths. Shen Li grew angry. Get up. I hate those who bow as the first thing they do. Xing Yan had backed up a step and was just quietly sizing up the newly arrived man kneeling on the ground. Shen Li realized that although Mo Fong was still kneeling, he was very guarded against Xing Yan. Turning to Mo Fong, she said, anyways, he is my subordinate. Shen Li pondered what to say. For Mo Fong to come and find her, a big event must have surely happened up in heaven. However, if she can't tell Mo Fong everything, a mortal knowing of all the little demon spirits and such strong knowledge of arrays is not something that is right. His body as a mortal, yet knowing so much, bears a great burden for him. If it is known that Xing Yan understands some of the truths of heaven, then who knows which near-day lightning will strike down and kill him. Shen Li looked around. The bloody demon spirits were left helpless by the sun, lying on the ground, unable to move. But just in case, Shen Li gave Xing Yan the red tasseled silver long spear in her hands. Take it and go somewhere else for now. He and I have some matters to discuss. My spear contains my spiritual aura, so no bloody baby spirits should try and attack you. Before Xing Yan could reply, the silver long spear was already in his arms. Glancing at the floor, he could see that the demon spirits were left helpless and couldn't move due to the sun. Xing Yan was about to deny, but suddenly Mo Fong had lifted his head and his stare pierced into Xing Yan's. His expression was vivid, as if almost yelling, "You dare to take the king's spear? Damn!" Xing Yan was silent for a moment before clutching the silver spear tightly to his bosom, and leisurely walked to the outside. He didn't forget to give Mo Fong a smug smile before he left. Mo Fong clenched his fist, but Shen Li actually smiled and helped him up. She patted his shoulder. "Young fellow, I really must thank you for injuring me that time. Otherwise, there would have been no way for me to escape." Mo Fong was a whole head higher than Shen Li, so she had to look up to see his face. A glimpse of a scar was at Mo Fong's neck, the result of his sacrifice to the red tasseled long spear. Her silver long spear contained demonic aura, preventing the scar from healing. No matter how good Mo Fong's healing abilities were, it could never get rid of it. Shen Li sighed. Later, when this foolish marriage has been abolished, I will go in front of the demon emperor myself and make sure that you receive compensation. Mo Fong lowers his head. Your subordinate doesn't dare. He stopped his formal speech this time and went straight to the point. Had King used her magical powers last night? Those up in heaven had felt the waves of power. I'm afraid that if you don't flee quickly now, it will be difficult to later. This, Shen Li had already known. However, there is still the current situation. If the little lotus mist kills the prince, then there is no one else whose powers rival the crown prince's. Then, who can shield Xing Yan? Welcome to my channel. This is the audiobook, Accompanying the Phoenix. Chapter 13. Today, I'm afraid to say that I cannot. Shen Li turned away to stare at the blood-red ground. I still have unfinished matters. Watching Shen Li's indecisive state, Mo Fong could not help but frown. He really did not wish to urge Shen Li, but this problem truly couldn't be delayed any further. He cupped his fist in his hand, and advised, "King, your departure from this area cannot be dragged on any further. If King gets caught now, the demon emperor will never give King another chance. Heaven is already preparing for the wedding, if at that time. What will happen, Shen Li knows clearer than anybody else." She glanced back at Xing Yan, who was standing on the side holding her red tasseled spear. He curiously poked one of the nearby demon spirits but, who wasn't even able to let out a single wail, before it disintegrated to ashes. Seeing this, Xing Yan seemed to let out a sigh, before continuing to examine her spear. Chen Li's lips curved out, turning her head to face Mo Fang again. She rubbed her forehead. I know, but right now, I am unable to leave right now. King? Mo Fang's eyebrows scrunched up, showing his confusion. In his eyes, Chen Li had only said will do or will not, therefore such a thing as unable to was truly rare. This argument, he really couldn't comprehend. Subordinate doesn't understand. These days, I have experienced many things within the mortal world, and unknowingly began to let one into my heart. Her voice sounded, her head turning to look at Xingyun. Mo Fang gawked, following her trail of sight, landing on the young man standing off to the side. That same young man, whose face looked as if he had never slept, messy, sickly pale face, slow heartbeat, the same young man that looked as if he was about to die an early death. This is the person King felt feelings for? At this time, Xingyun looked as if he had suddenly lost all strength in his wrist, unable to hold up the silver-long spear any further. It fell to the floor, making goo-goo-loo noises as it rolled to the nearby demon spirits. Suddenly, it released large amounts of magical chi, killing intent spilling off of it. Whenever the magical chi neared one of the helpless demon spirits, the demon spirit disintegrated to ashes. However, their malicious auras still remained, clouding the area with smoke. Xingyun coughed constantly, chasing after the spear. When he finally got it, the smoke vanished from his surrounds, looking 3x as more sickly as before. Chen Li sighed gently, such a person, before I met him, I've never thought that. She looked up at Mo Fang, whose brows were tightly scrunched. He and I are completely different. He has that weak body that can hardly be tossed around a few times before ending up dead. Right now, I cannot feel relieved and calm, leaving him here in a dangerous place. I wish to let him live safely before I leave. Although I have taken a fancy to him, I also know that humans and devils both go different paths. A mortal's life is very short, after only living briefly, will only exist in memory. Chen Li's voice was quiet, but its intonation was both gentle and firm. I will not be with him. Since we are not destined to be together, if I can give him a safe and happy life, then it will be good. Hearing her firm voice, Mo Fang understood, this was her decision. Now, no matter what anybody says, she will do as she has decided. Mo Fang hung his head in silence. After a long while, he kneeled down and cupped his hands, resigning to submit. Subordinate accepts the king's will, willing to share king's burdens. Let the king command. Hearing this, Chen Li pondered, half. She turned around to walk to Xingyun. If you can help delay them for half a day, this matter will be done. I obey your command. Chen Li turned her head to look him straight in the eye. Many thanks. Mo Fang's eyes sparkled, not saying a word as his body moved like a wind. There was only a flash before his figure could no longer be seen. When Chen Li reached Xingyun, she took her long spear back from his hands. Xingyun chuckled. Your long spear is quite powerful. Able to hold on to it for so long, you are also quite formidable. This spear had killed many beings, causing its malicious aura to become truly strong. Even laying eyes on it had caused many creatures to run away in fear. But Xingyun, this guy seemed indifferent to everything. Patience, fear, sadness, yet it never surfaces, always calm. In this sense, he could actually be considered a master. Moving on from her thoughts, Chen Li scanned the area in a circle with her eyes, whispering to Xingyun, the demon spirits are still here, so the young lotus miss hadn't ran away. Where could she be hiding? Do you even need to ask? Xingyun smiled, when a child gets attacked outside, where else can she go, but to run back home? Chen Li's eyes flashed, a lotus lives in a lake. Chen Li's eyes flashed, a water lotus. That was her real body. Since she still hasn't came out or hurt anyone yet, she must be hiding there. Finding out where she was, Shen Li was so excited that she was about to hurry there right that second. But when she was about to put her foot down, she suddenly stopped and turned to face Xingyun, a glare on her face. If I hadn't asked you, you never would have said anything. How could I do that? Xingyun laughed lightly, being so clever and experienced, I had thought that you surely had already figured out the key, and didn't need me to remind you. Shen Li glanced at him, not saying anything. However, her heart held an unexplainably strange feeling in it. It was as if, ever since they had entered the royal palace up till now, whether unintentionally or on purpose, Xingyun had always seemed to be hindering her movements, just like he didn't want her to deal with this problem and leave as soon as possible. The lake was gloomy, corpses floating not too far away. However, the same unbloomed flower that was in the lake yesterday was no longer a soft, pink color. Instead, the bud seemed to ooze out a deep, bloody red color that bled down the stem. Shen Li picked up a pebble near her foot and gently threw it, landing on the flower bud. She raised her voice, barking, out. There was no movement. Shen Li's eyes narrowed. If that's the case, then don't blame me. In mere moments, the spear that was in her hand gathered a thick killing intent, one that was razor sharp. She swung it down at the thick flower stem. Xingyun's hand abruptly grabbed her wrist, breaking off the spell. Shen Li frowned. What? Xingyun dropped her hand, his voice faint. Nothing, just never thought that you would only ask her once before wanting to end her life. Moreover, if you look at this clearly, she is innocent. I fear that if you were to kill her now, when you look back into the past, your soul will be burdened with tremendous regret. So you became the Buddha, suddenly so kind? She replied, this situation must end now. If she does not cooperate, then I will take the most direct way to finish this. Shen Li shoved Xingyun, her demeanor ice cold. I am not kind. In order to reach my goal, I will put my conscience locked away. Move. When opposing the enemy, Shen Li will never be kind-hearted. This is also one of the reasons why, despite being so young, been crowned the title of Azure Sky King. Slaughter with resolve, indifferent and cruel, that is something that even those older must study. Xingyun no longer blocked her way, standing off silently onto the side. Although he was quiet, he was actually pondering in his head. This girl named Shen Li, how many different faces did she have? It was really so interesting, making one want to see more. Ah! In the lake, the water shook. A sad, shrill scream emerged from the lotus, the bloody petals dyeing the lake red. Her face was slowly morphing into one of a human's. If it wasn't for the expression of resentment on her face, she was every bit similar to a cute, slim lotus fairy. Unfortunately. Why must you help him? The little lotus missus's eyes were red as she stared at Shen Li. Why do you need to help him? She seemed to have lost all reason, charging at Shen Li, her figure disappearing with a flash. For Shen Li, it was actually quite convenient. She easily seized her by her wrist, before hitting her Ming Man acupuncture point, leaving the little lotus paralyzed. Shen Li twisted her wrist into an submission, causing her head to be pinned against the fence. With a wave of Shen Li's hand, the spear disappeared, leaving her hand free. Under the surprised gaze of Xingyun, Shen Li ferociously whacked the little lotus's butt, a resounding paw echoing in the air. Admit your mistakes. Shen Li's hand was not light, the hit causing the little lotus's whole body to tremble. However, how could a complete demon spirit filled with resentment be afraid of fighting, causing her to struggle ferociously? What mistakes did I do? The one who made a mistake was Zhu Qingjin. Not bothering with the little lotus's nonsense, Shen Li kept on spanking her but again and again. Her body twitched, letting out cries until her throat was sore. Finally, the pain woke her up from the despair, causing her to gain reason once again. However, her little mouth still cursed, "I will let him die without a burial, I'll ruin this entire royal palace." Admit it. The heavens are heartless. Admit your mistake. I'm right. Not. Admit mistake. Shen Li kept on slapping her, but to the extent where she was crying and shouting, "I was wrong, I was wrong. Do not hit, I admit my mistake, boo-hoo." What did you do wrong? Shen Li stopped hitting, her hand also red from acid produced by her body. The little lotus missus's dress had once again turned a gentle pink color, the lotus in the lake the same as yesterday. The little bloody demon spirits disappeared, reverting back into their original spiritual states. They floated around aimlessly, normal humans unable to see them. Little Lotus was lying on the fence as she cried, "I shouldn't harm other people. I was wrong, I never should have harmed people." Shen Li released her, allowing Little Lotus to curl up on the bench as she cried, tears falling into the lake. Xingyan smiled as he gazed at the two, marveling, even a demon born out of resentment could be afraid of beatings. This move, so simple, but so effective, ah. It was you who had reminded me. Shen Li was still looking at the crying Little Lotus. She only has a child's temperament that can only think up of fearful revenge, but lack the ruthlessness to carry it out. Even in that hidden room, she only blocked the passageway. If she wanted to, it would have been easy for her to directly kill Prince Rue. Shen Li sighed, she had hurried home to hide when she was injured. If not for the yard of demon spirits, she would have even been afraid of us easily breaking out and getting revenge. With such a child's disposition, I would naturally only beat. However, if she really didn't come out, then I would be forced to stamp out the source of trouble. Xingyan struggled valiantly to hide his laughter, but ultimately failed, bursting out in chuckles and sighed, in brief, to subdue with military force. Shen Li waited, letting Little Lotus sob. She patted her on the shoulder, gently saying, "I sympathize with you, but this has already been done, and crying is useless. If Rue Palace is a place you no longer want to stay, then walk without looking back. Do not worry about him coming to kill you, I will not let him." She slowly stopped crying and shook her head, "It's not. Until now, I still cannot believe." She stuttered, squatting on the ground, "To me, he was so good, was. Only to him, he could only see hope for his wife. I was only a substitute. Not even can be considered a substitute, ah." Shen Li was silent, not sure how to comfort her. Xingyan suddenly opened his mouth to speak, yes. You are a raw material for medicine, just looking, no error or cracks. You can be refined very well, you are quite precious." Shen Li narrowed her eyes at him, out of his mouth, didn't even hold one cheerful sentence, "Ah. Chicken meat is also very good for nourishment and eating, so never mind you, but even this smart spirit isn't eaten, so let's go before we are turned into stew. When you went to buy a chicken, what did you want, ah?" Welcome to my channel, this is the audiobook, Accompanying the Phoenix. Chapter 14. The Little Lotus wiped her tears, quietly pondering. Finally, she took a deep breath and decided, "I want to see this side of him. If I walk away now, I will never get the chance to say goodbye. Even if in his eyes, I am nothing, ever since I've opened my eyes in this world, he has been my everything. He is the most important person in my life." Recollections of memories floated through her mind, causing her eyes to redden once again with tears. "I worked hard to become a real person, learned how to talk, studied human customs, just to gain his favor. Just to be with him. Not kill me, ah." Shen Li sighed, squatting next to her, "Although what I'm saying is a little cruel, you must listen. That Prince Rui, raising you from birth, only to slaughter you, for him, this is the only value you have. Anything else, no matter how much you do, even if you beg him, he will be completely cold and aloof. It has no value, do you understand? Shen Li held her face, using her thumb to wipe off her tears. Therefore, you must quickly stand back up and walk to the future. You are such a good girl, so forget about him, this world has so much more beautiful things to explore. In the back, Xingyan quietly looked at Shen Li's squatting figure. The little lotus miss also stared at Shen Li before lowering her head. You are carefree, but me, she lowered her head, burying her face into her knees. She sounded unwilling as she said, I would like to see what kind of woman she is, to make the prince go through such efforts, to revive her. I want to know, between her and I, how big the distance truly is. Shen Li stood up, exchanging looks with Xingyan. He spoke, go take a look, you'll have to face disappointment eventually. Shen Li's mouth twitched, thinking in her mind. Why would you need to see her once again? The fact is already there. Even if Little Lotus is better in every aspect than the woman lying on the bed, the one Prince Rui loves is not her. That cannot be changed. But seeing Little Lotus being so persistent, she swallowed down her thoughts, and said instead, okay, I'll bring you to see her. When we go down, hide behind Xingyan while I find an excuse to lead Prince Rui away. Then, you can stare at her as much as you like. The woman was already dead, it's not like Little Lotus can harm her. Shen Li used a special technique, instantly teleporting them to the secret chamber. Shen Li signaled Xingyan with her eyes to Little Lotus, Xingyan quickly moving to block her with his body. Shen Li then walked inside, finding Prince Rui sitting by the bedside. His eyes were fixed on the woman whom laid on the bed. Shen Li interrupted, the Little Lotus has been killed by me. Light, shallow, indifferent words echoed in the room. Prince Rui's body was stiff, not turning to look his head. Shen Li continued, all the bloody demon spirits, caused by the resentment has returned to normal. I will escort you out. The room was silent for a long time. Finally, Prince Rui laughed bitterly, his voice somber, why must I go? He bent down, lightly kissing the woman's icy cold forehead. Yishur hasn't awoken, so what difference does it make if Zhu Qingjin is alive or dead? Hiding in the dark, Little Lotus's fists were clenched tightly, the light in her eyes dimming. Throughout my life, I was constantly searching for power. To me, Yishur was just a woman. After a few years together, I had thought that she was still nothing to me. However, we both actually cared deeply about each other, seeping into our very being. For the past 3 years, I had been dreaming of her awakening every night only to be disappointed. So, I placed all of my hopes onto Little Lotus's body. But in the end, she too died. Prince Rui smiled sadly. When I look back, everything is empty. He caressed Yishur's hair gently, you may go. I'll accompany her here. I won't be going out. Shen Li was silent. This statement, it shows that one truly can die an emotional death. If this time, Prince Rui is hell-bent on death, then Xingyan. Before she could finish her thoughts, a pink figure suddenly ran past her. Such a surprise, she startled the god Shen Li so much, she did not have enough time to catch her. She could only watch as Little Lotus ran out towards Prince Rui, her palm ferociously slapping his face. Crying out like her life depended on it, she screamed at Prince Rui, I hate you. Rui Prince Zhu Qingjin looked at her, not quite recovered from the shock. He could only see the Little Lotus's figure change into a ball of silver light, leaping into Yishur's cold body. The last few drops of tears flew through the air, landing on his hand. On the bed, the woman coughed weakly. Prince Rui didn't notice, his eyes focused on Yishur. His eyes were bright as he stared. Eyes of hope. Shen Li felt something cold freeze over her heart. Little Lotus's sacrifice for this kind of man really wasn't worth it. Silly girl. She sighed. It felt as if her cries sounded once more next to her ears. Why me? Why me? For him, I practiced and studied every day to become a person. She was clearly just a supporting role, a side character. Why must that silly girl die for him? Cough. Cough. The woman in the bed coughed, almost choking. Prince Rui's eyes lit up, raw joy flooding through him, leaving him almost unprepared. Yi sure, Yi sure. He was constantly whispering her name, his hoarse voice sounding, you wait, I'll get you out. Prince Rui quickly scooped her up, carrying her as he quickly walked in front of Shen Li, an anxious look on his face. I'm sorry, I must trouble you to quickly clear up and exit. This is the only female that would be able to make the proud prince lower his head for help. Shen Li tugged Prince Rui's hand, pulling him to a stop, saying gently, Little Lotus said that, she for you, struggled through hardships to become a real person, not for you to slaughter. Now, for you, she sacrificed herself. Prince Rui was startled, listening to Shen Li's emotionless voice as she continued, my own fault, I was too careless about bringing her here. I hadn't thought that you would have been able to sense her here, knew that she was hiding behind us. Such a good play you had created, right Prince Rui? However, Shen Li didn't finish, but Prince Rui could guess the meaning behind it. Little Lotus had seen through him, but had still foolishly followed her feelings for him. She loathed the scheme Prince Rui had put on, but she still couldn't escape the plot. A truly, downright silly girl. Prince Rui was silent. Shen Li turned to Xingyan and spoke, I'll go deliver them outside, you stay still and wait for me here. Xingyan hid his hands behind him, his face heavy with dark circle, and gently nodded. However, the preoccupied Shen Li couldn't see the differences in the dark, only grasping Prince Rui's wrist. With a flash, the two were standing on the bridge near Prince Rui's residence. The palace was silent, lacking any signs of life. Corpses of bodyguards floated on the surface of the lake. Prince Rui's brows wrinkled, about to ask a question, but suddenly Shen Li disappeared with a flash, not saying a word of goodbye. The lady in his arms coughed twice, causing a sense of urgency to well up in his heart as he rushed down the bridge. As he did, his eyes were involuntarily attracted to the lotus in the lake. Withered leaves, bent stalks, and a dry flower head told that it was dead. In this moment, a picture inexplicably leaped into Prince Rui's head. A pink-cloaked girl leaped into his arms, smiling. Not yet able to speak, she instead rubbed her cheeks against his chest to express her love. She stuttered adorably, Zhu. Zhu, Lotus likes. Zizhu likes. Zhu L likes. Little Lotus? He remembers at that time, saying without hesitation, like. He easily deceived her, yet the deceived little girl just let out a bright, happy smile. So beautiful, it could almost light up his soul, letting him see all the darkness inside him. A liar. He was such a big liar. Since today, this world will never have another Little Lotus. At this moment, Zhu Qingjin actually hated himself, hated how despicable he really was. In the underground chamber, Shen Li slapped her hand angrily on the stone bed. The soul-tying array on the bed cracked, dust flying up into the air, causing Xingyan to cover his mouth, coughing lightly. Don't vent your anger onto the stone bed. Xingyan sighed, it was I chose to bring Little Lotus down here. If you want to vent your anger, just talk to me. Shen Li closed her eyes, her angry mood gradually calming down. If I were her, then I must kill that man. Make him pay for my life with his. Her demeanor was cold and gloomy. To sacrifice herself for that kind of man's happiness, he is unworthy. It's not right for outsiders to have the final say. Xingyan spoke, as long as she was willing, no one is qualified to judge this matter is right or wrong. Shen Li felt an urge in her heart. That guy didn't know who he has killed. How could he not have known? Xingyan smiled faintly. He knows, just for him, little Lotus's feelings simply didn't matter. Shen Li was silent, anger stirring in her heart. Such a disgusting man, other woman always on his mind. Suddenly she thought of her own situation, Fu Rong's own disgusting nature. So annoying. If I ever fancy a man, then I will never care about anyone else or let people interfere with us. To me, I will only accept the whole thing, if only a part, I won't care. If he dares to scheme with me, then I'll break his bones. Her speech was loud and clear, causing Xingyan to turn, shocked. Blinking to refocus, he spoke, nice courage. Shen Li regained her composure and scratched her head awkwardly. Of course, the day before yesterday, I took a fancy to you. However, we won't be together in the future, so you are still free to marry. Listening to her words, in spite of holding it in, Xingyan burst into laughter. Before he could finish, Shen Li waved her hand. I don't have any more time to stay here. Come, I'll send you out. Okay. Xingyan agreed, extending his hand. But before Shen Li's hand could grab him, he shrank his arm back. He coughed hoarsely, his waist bending towards the floor. Shen Li was startled, not yet recovered from her surprise when Xingyan started vomiting out clouds of black blood. Shen Li was worried for his life. How? Xingyan opened his mouth, wanting to reply, but black blood just repeatedly gushed out instead. Shen Li rushed to hold him up, grabbing his hand to get his pulse. However, on his hand was a charred, thumb-sized black hole. Shen Li looked closer, realizing that it wasn't newly made, but was caused by the baby demon spirit's tears. When did you receive the wound? Shen Li was furious. Why didn't you tell me earlier? The surrounding flesh of the wound was already infected, the black flesh slowly expanding. The bloody spirits were a result of resentful magical qi being released into the air. Therefore, their bodily fluids were not only putrid, rotting, but also very, very toxic. Xingyan was already very weak, meaning the infection was many times more serious than it would be for the common person. Yet for so long, he didn't say a thing. Shen Li really wanted to hit him, but also feared that if she lost control of her strength, would kill him in one shot. Therefore, she could only clench her teeth and force back her anger. She hauled him onto her back, angrily shouting, You! When you spat out that toxic black blood at me, did you want to kill me? Xingyan's lips were still black, blood flowing down from the corner of his lips. However, he still laughed faintly. I tried to hold it back, but wasn't able to, so I had to. Shen Li grinded her teeth. A sickly person shouldn't try to flaunt himself as a hero. You shut up. Yeah. Xingyan sighed quietly. When you were in your troubles, I have never once turned my back on you. Welcome to my channel. This is the audiobook, Accompanying the Phoenix. Chapter 15. Shen Li didn't dare to wander around the palace aimlessly, in fear of the infection spreading even faster. She brought Xingyan to one of the many empty rooms, not even a shadow of another person to be found. Shen Li gritted her teeth, and pushed her palm into Xingyan's back. This can only temporarily relieve your pain. I don't have the skill to treat you, and the common doctors here aren't able to treat it either. As such, I can only go past the capital, into the suburbs, to request the local land god to come. It will take quite long, so you must wait here patiently. Don't move from here. Xingyan smiled helplessly. How can I? Even I want to move, but I cannot. Shen Li stood up, silent for a long time, at him. Finally, she spoke in a low voice, later. I might not come back, but you can still rest assured that the local land god will heal you. She turned to leave. She was reluctant to part, but the time had come. Even so, her voice was still somewhat gloomy. The land god's river is far, if we cannot meet each other again. You must take care of yourself. For the past days, thank you for taking care of me. In the empty room, Xingyan was speechless for a while, before suddenly bursting into laughter, despite struggling not to. Thanking me in such a gloomy voice, you really are unwilling to leave, ah. Wind blew through the open windows. Xingyan lifted his head. His hair scattering from the wind, lips moving into a gentle sigh, in the end. She never looked at me clearly. Always making one feel frustrated. Shen Li thought, Mo Fang had said that he can delay them for 1/2 a day, but against the elites of the demonic realm, even if he tried his best, he still may not be able to drag it out for so long. Shen Li no longer dared to stay in the Rue Palace. If the pursuing troops were to come here and search, it would only bring disaster to the innocent Xingyun. Her current magical powers are 70 to 80% recovered. Against the demonic realm's elites, although she is not completely confident of escaping, she could at least wrestle them down here in the open wilderness, giving her some hope in getting away. Shen Li moved extremely fast, only a flash could be seen before she stood on the outskirts of the wild mountains. She stood on one, looking afar. It was a sunny day, sweeping scenery stretching in the distance. The city capital could barely be seen. Her robe swished as she turned and marched into the wooded mountains, walking to the place that contained the most magical energy. Magical power condensed in the hollow of her palm, slamming into the earth. She lowered her head, solemnly shouting, "Come." Light from her palm overflowed, pouring into the floor. With her as the center, the light rapidly spread to the surrounding earth, mountain rock trembling as the birds and animals all fled in terror. The winds blew up Shen Li's robe. When it settled down, shadows of figures appeared in the silent woods. As they showed up, the intense magical light surrounding Shen Li dispersed into the air. She stood up, turning in a circle, to examine the newcomers. There were the elderly, with white dotting their beards. Young girls, and bizarre-looking youths also stood. They were all looking at Shen Li with shock. Shen Li knew that the sudden wave of magical qi had frightened the land spirits, but there was no time to explain. If they are afraid of her, then that is also good. She made her face even colder, speaking darkly, "Who can treat a human illness?" The land spirits looked at each other questioningly. A young youth with an antler on his head stepped forward hesitantly, trembling with each step. Aye. Shen Li's heavy stare fell onto him, causing the boy to squat down with his hands covering his hand, screaming, "Miss, don't kill me." Shen Li's mouth twitched, trying to suppress the despicable expression off her face. Finally, she settled into a cold frown. In Rue Palace within the capital city lies a human in the west building. He is called Xingyun, and was injured by a resentful baby demon spirit. The toxin is killing him, so I have come here to seek one that is capable of treating him. After explaining her purpose and problem, the land spirits all breathed out a sigh of relief. The old white-bearded man spoke, "If it's like this, then Hulu, quickly go and assist her." Hulu trembled, looking at Shen Li in fear. Shen Li suddenly interrupted, "I will not be going, but you must go and treat him." She stared at Hulu, eyes cold and gloomy. "How long will the treatment for a demon-infected wound take?" "RR. Roughly half an hour." "Good." Shen Li waved her hand, the gleaming red-tasseled silver long spear landing directly into the rock in front of him, piercing more than 3 inches though. Hulu cried with alarm, cold sweat running down his forehead like rain. He could only listen to Shen Li's threatening voice. If, after half an hour, you still haven't come back, then with this silver long spear, I will slaughter everyone here in a surrounding 300-mile radius. Welcome to my channel. This is the audiobook, Accompanying the Phoenix. Chapter 16. The dark clouds rumbled. There was no lightning, yet thunderclaps boomed loudly. For this abnormal phenomenon, the people were in a state of panic and anxiety. Within the Rue Palace, the small room was overflowing with killing intent. Although Qi Rong's face still held a smile, his hands have already waved open a folding fan. Qin Yan had also already unsheathed his sword. The atmosphere within the chamber was enough to start a battle with a mere dropping of a hair. Both sides knew that if it were to be started, the other party would not be met with mercy, due to relationships. The battle will be fought as if it were a war. King Qi Rong waved his fan, laughing. You've already caused a lot of trouble to the Demon Emperor, making him furious. Now, soldiers are prowling every inch of this world. He looked at the sickly Xingyan behind her. You as the Azure Sky King may be able to preserve your own life, but you definitely cannot save him as well. I hope that king will reevaluate her own situation and not act rashly. Shen Li paid no attention to him, only slightly leaning her body to turn her head at pale Xingyan to shoot him a look, speaking, Are you still alive? Alive, Xingyan shook his head, laughing, but may die soon. You cannot die. Shen Li's right hand gripped the hanging spear, then roughly, with the sharp edge of the spear point, slashed the hollow of her palm. The hanging spear absorbed the blood, dazzling light immediately shining. Qin Yan frowned, about to go forward in an attempt to seize Shen Li. Shen Li waved her left hand, splatters of blood landing 3 feet away in front of Qin Yan. When he stepped foot onto the bloodstain, he felt a red-hot glowing flame was cooking him from head to toe. He used his magical power, forcing the flame to scatter. But unexpectedly, the broiling fire only seemed to get hotter. It was as if it had its own consciousness as it leaped, going so far as to even attack his 2 eyes. Qin Yan, to protect his eyes, had no choice but to retreat back to the door. Shen Li spun the hanging spear, thrusting it straight into the ground in front of her. One could see the blood on the spear tip moved along with the shaft, sliding down as it seeped into the earth. One could only see a golden flash as the blood condensed into a circle around 2 Chen Li's wide, surrounding Shen Li. Another one appeared, circling Xingyun. She then tore off piece of her robe and bandaged her left hand as she turned to Xingyun, speaking. If I'm here, you cannot die. Xingyun stared at her distractedly, the light behind her twinkling. Yet that dazzling ray couldn't even be compared to Shen Li's own vivid aura. It filled all of his sight, never ending, almost even making himself forget. Shen Li's arm looped through his armpit, hauling his body onto her back. Their bodies were pasted together, her body heating his, blood coursing through his internal organs. Xingyan's lips held a seldom-seen curve, making it impossible for one to decipher his mood, only pitch black. King Qin Yan spoke solemnly, a blood sacrifice technique will harm the soul. The wedding day is near, hopes king will treasure one's health. Shen Li sneered, if hasn't, then my feet and hands would have been cut off and I would have been bound and sent to marriage. This is just a soul wound, what's to fear? Her gaze examined the room, although she couldn't see what was going on outside, she could still sense the general position of the soldiers outside. She wanted to find the direction with the least amount of people to force her way out. But Qin Yan and Qi Rong both instantly understood what she planned to do. They shared a look with each other, this matter cannot be dragged on any further. They both waved their weapons, and suddenly, 2 thunderbolts struck the golden circle, making a gap in the magic. Spotting it, the 2 charged in. When such powerful supernatural powers collided, the remnants surged into the air, and after a loud boom, the little wing of the house disintegrated into ashes. Before the dust settled down, the dark clouds in the sky revealed themselves. The space was filled with innumerable rays of arrows. It was the pursuing solidars, who were hiding in the clouds and took advantage of the array to attack, magic boosting the arrows. Among the rain of arrows, a black figure and a red figure leapt from the debris. Qing Yan fell onto a knee, but he still couldn't stop himself from sliding. Even with one hand gripping the floor, he still slid for quite a while before stopping. In the meanwhile, Ji Rong changed his palm into one of a paw, hitting the pole on the bridge. The push was so powerful that more than a few poles broke when contact was made. Losing the support of the pole, the bridge broke down and collapsed, causing ashes to fill the area. A red figure opened his hand, dropping the remnants behind him as he gently wiped his face that was scattered with blood. This is the first time facing the Azure Sky King. The king's power is really surprising. Ah! The remnants of golden light glittered in the ashes. At first, it looked as if it no longer had any use, but after a while, it once again shone brightly with powerful, golden light. It surrounded Shen Li, whose face was pale with blood trailing down her lips. Xing Yan's hand was leaning on her shoulder, struggling to stand. Although his body held to injuries, the poison had already reached his heart. He could no longer speak well. He whispered into Shen Li's ear, "Why?" Xing Yan's breath made the hairs on Shen Li's neck shiver, and she wiped the blood off her lips. "Don't argue," she snapped, "I'll make you continue to live." Her voice was hoarse, evidence of her injuries. Xing Yan cracked a smile. "Shen Li, life and death are ruled by fate. You said you do not regard it, I too say no." He sighed, "You." Not giving time for him to finish, the sword that was in Xing Yan's hand stood up, attacking once more. Shen Li saw the sword, one hand grabbing Xing Yan's waist as she rotated the hanging spear. Her hoarse voice shouted loudly as magical qi began to surround her. It condensed into a sharp sword, turning to Xing Yan, wanting to hack him in two. Looking at such a blunt, frontal, untactful attack, he snorted in disdain, easily dodging. But unexpectedly, the blade unexplainably curved, changing directions. It attacked out to the horizon. Xing Yan suddenly had a bad feeling and turned around, attempting to block, but it was too late. Golden light shot into the black-robed soldiers. The survivors were caught unprepared, dispersing in a panic, finally revealing a way out. Shen Li's figure jumped, directly flying forcefully in that direction. Xing Yan sneered, "King really looks down on us." As soon as he finished those words, his figure disappeared from his original position, only to appear once again blocking Shen Li's path. "Carrying someone, you still hope you could be faster than me?" Xing Yan's hand brandished a long, double-edged sword, strong magical qi shooting towards Shen Li, causing the golden light around her to cave in slightly. Shen Li blocked, clenching her teeth. She was forced back by several feet. When Xing Yan saw this, he silently let go of the hand clasped on her shoulder. His body had just started to fall, but suddenly, Shen Li's hand grabbed him tightly. She spoke angrily, "Do not add to the chaos." But Xing Yan just sighed helplessly, "It's not I that wanted to add to the chaos, it's just the lower back pain." Shen Li's strength was big, and had no trouble grabbing him on the waist. However, she didn't want to keep Xing Yan in such a tiresome position. Her grip was painful, but up in the sky, she had no time to put him down and switch. She could only clench her teeth and say in a low voice, "Hold on." In her hands, the hanging spear danced, piercing towards the sky. Ji Rong shouted loudly, "Defend to the west." That is the direction the land spirit had left in, she also wishes to go there. Shen Li naturally wanted to go there, that was where the people that could save Xingyun lived. The dark clouds rapidly accumulated to the west. Shen Li did not hide nor evade. Rather, her body burst out with golden light, shining brightly, those who block the way shall die. The hunging spear surged with murderous intent, blood from the demon soldiers still absorbing, but suddenly, the dark clouds released some sort of mysterious power, shoving Shen Li several feet back. The golden light radiated by Shen Li seemed to be restrained by something, leaving her unable to move an inch. Shen Li's voice was filled with anxiety, this strength. Before she could finish her words, the golden light around her body degenerated, and an incorporeal power fiercely hit her face, slapping her directly onto a large, open area in Ruwei Palace. The blue slab stones that were on the floor earlier had been crushed, only leaving a deep crater in the area she was in before. After the dust settled down, Xingyun could be seen lying on Shen Li's body. Although he had no wounds on him, he had fainted. However, falling from such a great height, Shen Li was badly injured as she laid passed out for a long time before slowly recovering. At this time, Qing Yan and Qi Rong were standing at the edge of the pit. But after a closer look, one could see an additional figure standing near, sunlight blocked behind his back. The man was broad, gold-embroidered within his black robes, which fluttered in the wind. 2 gold hair laces from behind him flew in front, nobility of the same nation, yet you become increasingly more audacious. His voice, calm as always, held a royal feeling of majesty, making one unconsciously want to submit. Qing Yan and Qi Rong cupped their hands and kneeled. Demon Emperor, beseech to quell your anger. The Demon Emperor had actually came personally. Shen Li sensed his breathing getting weaker and weaker, his body no longer as warm as before. Shen Li's heart suddenly felt cold. A sense of helplessness grew in her heart. She had ran and struggled so much, but she could still not escape the grasp of destiny. Out! The Demon Emperor's cold voice ordered. Shen Li wiped the blood off her lips and holding Xingyun, she jumped out of the pit. She placed Xingyun on his side and checked his pulse weak, but alive. Do you know your wrongs? Through his silver mask, the Demon Emperor sounded somewhat dull. Shen Li looked at Xingyun expectantly. Do not know, she spoke, choosing not to marry the one she does not love. Shen Li does not know of what wrongs she has committed. Not accepting the forced marriage, Shen Li does not know of what that wrong was. Not wanting for the people of the demonic realm to be restrained in heaven, Shen Li does not know of what wrongs she has done. Her eyes held a cold light to them, looking at the eyes hidden behind a silver mask. When the people of the demonic realm submits to heaven and lives there, they only have 1,000 remaining years to live. Those heavenly immortals may idle about, crossing each day carefreely. However, my demon people must live in the broken-down ruins, adjacent to the deep space-time rip. Year by year, miasma invades the ruins, no hope for any vegetation. My demon people will be crossing their lives in a way that is miserable beyond description. As part of the royal family and nobility, we still need to help those useless guys from heaven to suppress the monster under the space-time rip? Why should we still have to, living in those broken-down ruins, risking our lives? Shen Li sneered, I look down on that sort of heaven, not wanting to marry. What is the wrong I have committed? These words spoken out loud made both Qi Rong and Qing Yan silent. The Demon Emperor also quieted, but soon spoke again, you are not wrong. But on this matter, you have still violated the imperial edict. He waved his hand, take her away by force, lead her back for the penalty. Qing Yan made a move, wanting to grab Shen Li's arm, but was scolded away by Shen Li, this king will go. Her static stare, gazed attentively at Xingyun. Her stare might have been a bit too hot, as Xingyun opened his eyes, vision blurry. When he saw Shen Li looking at him, his pale lips cracked open. He chuckled like he normally did. "Shen Li, you look even thinner than me." "Yeah." Shen Li answered, "You can just think of it as me acting frivolously towards you." In front of everyone, she leaned over and planted a heavy kiss on Xianyun's lips. Shen Li's golden-colored hair tie had snapped and her hair came undone, swaying next to Xianyun's cheeks. The interaction of the cool touch of the strands of hair and the burning touch of the lips brought about a strange sensation within his body, causing him to become dazed. Shen Li did not know how to kiss, so she could only roughly cover Xianyun's lips with her own, and it was done with so much force that Xianyun felt pain. In this moment, her hand clutched onto his, the index finger, gently covering the charred wound. Her fingertip flashed with light, as a bead of light gradually formed within her chest. It slowly moved to her finger and melded with Xingyun's flesh, replacing and filling out the hole inside his hand. "I had said that you cannot die." Shen Li's lips left his, her voice somewhat quiet. "Although in the future, you may not feel better, you will at least be able to live in peace." She was not skilled in the art of healing, so she couldn't completely erase the toxins within his body. She could only entwine her own magical powers with Xingyun's blood and flesh, so the magic and the toxins in his body will battle, then suppress each other. Although this can prevent the toxins from reaching his heart and killing him, the unavoidable constant pain will still be there. Shen Li straightened out Xingyun's robes, and standed up, gently patting his shoulder. "When I said I fancied you, it was true. But I am in an arranged marriage, and can no longer stay with you." A strong sense of nostalgia accompanied Shen Li as she left. The remaining three had also disappeared. Shortly after, the dark clouds above the capital city also left. Xingyun was left lying on the ground. His eyes held a distracted look to them. The two forces within his body constantly fighting back caused him to feel some discomfort, but his breath and temperature had recovered. The heat remained on his lips, and he was unable to help but look high up at the sky, touching it gently. After a long while, he laughed quietly, murmuring, "Speak as if you wanted to be with me, I would be willing to do the same." In the air, a long strand of hair landed on his face. Xingyun held it in his hands. Unexplainably, he couldn't smile. Not even a little. Cannot be together with him. Huh. Clouds flew fleetingly in the sky. A mortal, who will re-enter reincarnation, and forget everything that had just happened and transpired here in just less than 100 years. The demon emperor stepped into the clouds, speaking coldly, "Why waste 500 years of cultivation to repair his wound with such magical power?" Hearing this, Qi Rong and Qing Yan both looked at Shen Li with shock. 500 years of cultivation, for them and their kind, was often just the tip of the iceberg. But what was important was, the Azure Sky King actually gave it to a mortal? Shen Li's hands were bound together by an iron chain, her hanging loose hair made her look somewhat distressed. However, her eyes were not at all dejected, rather, they just looked into a distant place. "I like." The demon emperor's facial features contorted something like a sneer under the silver mask. "You are nothing but worried that I would send some men to kill him, to stamp out the source of trouble." His demeanor was chillingly cold. "Why should I bother to, when in just 1 to 2 years later, he will forget about you, get married, and have children? That man will live a life that has nothing to do with you. Your feelings would be but a fleeting dream." Shen Li stayed silent, thinking at heart, if that were to be such, it'd really be good. She recalled memories of the small courtyard, the cool breeze ruffling the grapevine lattice. The sound, it was so gentle. Xingyun, that kind of gentle person should be living that kind of life. Ah, but one person living a life like that would be too lonely, someone should accompany him in that little courtyard. For someone to accompany him is of course good, even though that person isn't her. Shen Li suddenly remembered of the day she had suddenly woken up in his yard. That was the first time she saw him, ripples of sun falling on him. The warm breeze was just right as he laid on the rattan chair, napping. She hoped that throughout all his remaining years, every day would be that tranquil. Shen Li realized something looking at the distant palace. Her heart had finally understood a little of how little Lotus felt. Some matters, even if it is not worth it, it all consists of what you feel. End of chapter 16. In the phrase, clouds flew fleetingly in the sky, it can be intercepted in two ways, Shen Li and the others in the clouds, or a word play on Xing Yan's name. In Chinese, Yun means clouds. So one can see it as his mind or heart is confused, or fleeting, or it. View it as your own way. Welcome to my channel. This is the audiobook, Accompanying the Phoenix. Chapter 17. The ice-encrusted doors slowly creaked open. Wisps of cold air gushed out from the palace, revealing a 10-foot main hall. 4 icicles stood, representing 4 different directions. In the middle, a glittering, translucent pure ice orb floated. Within the frozen orb, there was a woman. A dark-colored robe hugged her body, clenching her waist. Her hair was loose, eyes closed as if sleeping. But when the sound of footsteps echoed throughout the hall, her 2 eyes suddenly opened. They glistened with a sharp light as she turned to the source of the noise. King, the black-robed envoy, kneeled on one knee, kowtowing in a salute. Subordinate carries orders from Demon Emperor, came to escort King out of confinement. He fished out a porcelain bottle from his bosom and unscrewed the cork, allowing the blood within the bottle to splash out onto the ground. Instantly, the 4 icicles lit up as inscriptions circled then. In the middle, the frozen ice orb slowly melted. When the ice had thawed to roughly the size of half a person, the rays of light emitted by the icicles stopped. The frozen orb that has lost its airborne support instantly plummeted to the ground, shattering into uncountable years' worth of snow and ice inside the main hall. Being frozen for too long, Shen Li's 4 limbs were somewhat stiff, her body was covered with ice fragments. With the black-clothed envoy's help, she slowly managed to stand up. You sealed me in the ice sacrificial palace, but it's only considered as confinement? The ice sacrificial palace was one of the demon realm's forbidden lands, and holds the status and use as heaven's space-time rip, able to suppress even the most vicious and powerful of demons. The only difference between the two was that the ice sacrificial palace's power was even greater than heaven's space-time rip. But in return, it could only trap 1 demon at a time. But throughout the millennia, all the felons were either captured and placed in heaven's space-time rip or killed. Therefore, the ice sacrificial palace had remained here empty. Shen Li had never once dreamed that she herself would have been sealed within there one day, nor has she ever thought that the marriage edict given by the heavenly emperor would have caused the demon emperor to feel this much stress, that he was so afraid of her once more trying to escape the marriage, he put her here. Shen Li stretched her arms, stepping over the foot of the mountain of ice. She walked to the front door, her mouth ridiculing. Has the wedding team from heaven come to escort the bride there? That's why you're finally willing to free me. The black-clothed envoy followed behind her, respectfully answering, King is impatient. There is still another month of preparation before the wedding. Shen Li was startled, turning her head to ask him, how long was I in there? She remembered that day after she was caught by the demon emperor, he had ordered that she was to be confined to the ice sacrificial palace. However, no one had told her how long she would be confined. Within the ice, she had no way of telling time. A day or a year, they would have all felt the same to her. The envoy replied, the demon emperor's heart was benevolent, and had only confined King until January. In January, 30 days had already passed. Once they stepped out of the ice sacrificial palace, the stone doors behind them loudly slammed shut. Shen Li raised her head to look, and not far away was Mo Feng calmly standing. When he saw her come out, he bowed his head in a salute. Seeing him, Shen Li was startled. She didn't think that he would be here, and was even more surprised when Mo Feng turned to speak to the black-robed messenger. "I will escort the king to return back now. With this subordinate will return to deliver a successful report to the demon emperor." The black-robed envoy disappeared. Mo Feng lowered his head and kneeled. "Mo Feng, couldn't help king escape. Please punish this subordinate." Shen Li was surprised for a moment, but then smiled and patted Mo Feng's shoulder. "I know you must have tried your best, struggling for that half a day. Just me escaping is suffice for you. But it's just I that couldn't escape. It was my fault for not being able to live up to your efforts. King. Go, return back home." Shen Li stretched lazily. "I haven't gone home to sleep for a long time." "King," Mo Feng must say something. He was silent for a long time, before finally speaking. "That human has passed away within the mortal world." N. Shen Li answered, "I have already guessed so. 1 day in the sky was equal to 1 year in the mortal world. 30 whole years have passed. Xing Yin has no more than an ordinary human body. To have died in bed of old age, by now would have been normal. Moreover, if not for the fact that Xing Yin has already left his world, how would the demon emperor dare to release her so easily? He, who has watched her grow up since birth, knew all too clearly of her temperament. Go back." Shen Li walked 2 steps, then suddenly turned her head to look at Mo Feng. "When he passed away, did you see him?" Mo Feng nodded, very calm and serene. "Of course, because he is Xing Yin. No matter how bad something is, in his eyes, he will just brush it away like dust." Her lips curved. "He ought to smile." Mo Feng remained silent, his eyes flickering. He remembered, when he was in the mortal world watching his last moments, he was lying on the sickbed. Although he was old, his demeanor had never changed. He stared at him, saying, Shen Li's subordinate. His life energy was weak and feeble. Just that short phrase forced him to gasp for breath. Afterwards, he then said, "Has Shen Li been well recently?" Mo Feng did not answer him, and Xing Yin didn't continue to ask either. Rather, he just leaned back and smiled. He closed his eyes and went to rest. Really is an indifferent person, but even as such a man, he still kept Shen Li in his mind, remembering for more than 30 years. Mo Feng chose to not tell Shen Li of this matter, instead just quietly asking, "Will King look for his reincarnation?" "Won't look." Shen Li stepped on a cloud, not looking back as she said, "I fell for Xing Yin only, the first generation. Any other incarnations of him, I have nothing to do with them." The Azure Sky King palace was very close to the imperial city. As Shen Li flew back to her palace, countless demons looked up and stared at her. She was used to it as she landed in her mansion, but before she could even stop, a large figure ran up and kneeled in front of her, clutching her legs and crying, "King! You've finally come back." Shen Li was startled, but then just rubbed her forehead. "Up. Prepare the water, I want to take a bath." "Chef? Make a meal, I'm hungry." The chubby girl lifted her head, eyes flashing with tears as she looked at Shen Li. "Earlier, General Mo Feng had come and informed us that King would return today. Roya has already heated the water, and the cook has prepared the meal just as King came back." For a moment, Shen Li was surprised. She had never thought that Mo Feng had the foresight to prepare everything already. When she turned to look back, Mo Feng actually saluted to her, speaking, "On King's safe arrival, Mo Feng asks to be excused." Very well. Roya escorted Shen Li to her room, and Shen Li lied down on the bed. She wasn't fond of large amounts of people, so her palace's staff were kept at the minimum. The cleaning lady is Ms. Zhang, an unsocial woman. Normally, it is quite hard to see her, since she was always hiding in hidden places, silently cleaning the palace. The tasks of a lady-in-waiting, clothes maid, and server were all done by Roya. She was a small, but boisterous and cheerful girl. The cook is simple and kind. He usually never leaves the kitchen. There's also King. King. The king has returned, la. In the bedroom sat a cage which contained a very loud, squawking parrot. Shoo shoo, shut your beak. Shen Li glanced at it, then walked behind the screen. She took off her robes and sat them aside, sinking into the water comfortably. She raised her head in satisfaction, wanting to relax quietly. But then, across the screen, the parrot started squawking once again. Did not run away, king. You were caught and now have to get wed to that prince, sad? King, king, king. Shen Li's mouth twitched and she waved her hand. The door of the iron cage opened with a loud clang. Her hand changed into a claw, and lightly pulled. The parrot that was in the cage had suddenly reappeared in her hand, pulled through space. Shen Li's clawed fingers pinched its wing and raised her eyebrow, staring at the parrot. To think of it, I've never seen you without your feathers before. Inside the room, Shushu was silent. King, don't, Ai. Good king, Forgive, king. Outside of the door, Roya was guarding over the entrance. She looked at the doorway happily. Today, Shushu and King are quite happy together. Just as she rested on the edge of the door, a bear bird suddenly rammed out with all his might, pushing at the crack between the door and shot out. Its buttocks shook left and right as it ferociously dug a hole, before jumping inside, burying himself. Roya was startled. That was Shushu? Leave him alone, he can't run away. Shen Li's indifferent voice carried out from inside the room. In any case, he can't fly now. Listening to her happy tone, there was a sense of satisfaction inside. Roya was overwhelmed with shock, turning her head. She deeply believed that King must have been subject to many terrible forms of abuse. This psychology. What a change from before. When it was time to eat, an emissary from heaven came, bearing a message. The Azure Sky King was to come to the heavenly palace in the afternoon, and heaven's emissary has come with the wedding dress's design, as to let Shen Li choose. Shen Li just nodded, continuing to leisurely eat her meal. After the emissary left, Roya, who was fanning Shen Li as she ate, humphed. Choose what wedding gown? That Casanova playboy Fu Rong. We, who were willing to come back and allow King to wed him, was the luckiest thing that happened to him. But he actually dared to run into the palace to ask of the heavenly emperor to abolish the marriage more than a few times. It was like he actually believed King wanted to marry him. Shen Li listened, glancing at Roya. Gentleman Fu Rong actually went and disturbed the heavenly emperor. How many times? Roya carefully counted her fingers, but when she reached the last one, she could only scratch her head, saying, countless. King, when you were in the mortal world, I've heard that in heaven, Fu Rong's space was filled with women. Then my heart is satisfied. At least this way, the other person arranged in the marriage was suffering from this as well. Just thinking about it already made her feel happier. Damned woman. A mahogany plate was covered by silk-threaded gold robes, the plate thrown harshly on the ground. The servant immediately knelt down. Lord Immortal, beseech to quell your anger. His body was cloaked with a snow-white robe, inlaid with gold. The man ferociously stepped on the remains of the mahogany plate, angrily shouting, "It's her fault, not escaping the arranged marriage. Now she's choosing the wedding gown? Why do I not know of this?" The servant continued to kneel, meekly whispering, The Azure Sky King was found back as early as January. She couldn't fight this. Useless at this critical time. Fu Rong was furious, clenching his teeth. No. I must go and beg the celestial emperor. That kind of women to marry, absolutely not. As soon as he finished his words, he lifted up the hem of his robe and hurried to the heavenly palace. The accompanying servant followed hastily. Immortal, no, ah. If you make another scene, the heavenly emperor won't be happy. Fu Rong just ignored him as he continued to hurry to the heavenly emperor's palace. Without bothering to inform the servants of his arrival, he just pushed through the door, entering. With a loud tong, he threw himself to the floor kneeling, weeping loudly. Royal grandfather, grandson. Grandson is bitter, ah. The palace was silent, but Fu Rong continued to sob. However, there were no angry remarks from the heavenly emperor. He suddenly got a bad feeling and lifted his head to see. On the throne sat the heavenly emperor, his face black with anger. But standing next to him was a man. His hair was pinned lazily with a blue brooch, wisps hanging out. A long, white gown adorned his body, not even a speck of dust to be seen. His figure was handsome, and he radiated an aura of a king, high and lofty, attracting Fu Rong's attention. The heavenly emperor suppressed his anger, voice dark. Fu Rong, have you come to see Sir Xingji? Fu Rong was shocked. Even though he spent most of his time on debauchery and didn't study the various famous gods of heaven, he would still know Xingji, the only living ancient god. Welcome to my channel. This is the audiobook, Accompanying the Phoenix. Chapter 18. Xingji turned and faced the heavenly emperor. Since both sides are so against it, then the emperor might wish to bring the marriage back a little and delay it so the two have time to adapt. If they marry right now, then Xingji is afraid that. His head turned to look at Fu Rong. The smile on his face was wider, but his mouth spat out 3 words that made Fu Rong feel chills. Bloodshed might occur. Blood. Bloodshed. Fu Rong suddenly envisioned a barbaric, strong woman pressing him down on the floor, a long, silver spear constantly stabbing at his body. He trembled violently, looking desperately at the heavenly emperor, whose face had a helpless look to it. The wedding date has already been established. If it were to suddenly be changed on such a short notice, I'm afraid that it would be inappropriate. Xingji smiled. It can be counted as my own fault. When I saw the marriage registry, I had thought that the Azure Sky King Shen Li was a male, and that Fu Rong was a female immortal. These 2 names, one hard and one soft, seemed to have suited each other very well. I hadn't thought that I've mixed the 2 up. So Xingji helps give them more time to adjust his forgiveness, making up for his error. Will that be good enough for the other gods to oblige? After Xingji's argument, the heavenly emperor that was previously unwilling, hastily agreed, unable to even refuse. Turning his head, he could only release his anger on Fu Rong. Why are you still here? You haven't excused yourself yet? Fu Rong hurriedly kneeled before withdrawing, walking through the hall with long steps. The accompanying aide caught up and asked, Lord Immoral, still good? Fu Rong massaged his forehead, muttering, good is good, but how strange. Since it's a mistake, why not just get rid of this whole marriage? That way, there would be no risks at all in the future. He paced in the hall, pondering, was he trying to insult me, saying my name was like a female's? The attendant was confused. Lord Immortal? Fu Rong dramatically swung his hair. Haha, it doesn't matter. In any case, this immortal is still free and unfettered. Forward to the 100-blossom pond to take a look at the countless beauties. Lord Immortal. Ah, wait, ah. The heavenly emperor will definitely be angry. When the news was passed on to the demonic realm, Shen Li was currently in the demon's palace. She, amongst several other generals, were discussing official business at a small round table. The soldiers situated between the borders of heaven had felt fluctuations from the spacetime rip. Although it wasn't a lot of power, the spacetime rip has been abnormally silent for more than 1,000 years, as stagnant as still water. With a sudden movement happening so abruptly, one must be vigilant. The high-ranking generals discussed, finally choosing Mo Feng and Zhe Xia, two generals, to go to the boundary and investigate. If there were to be an anomaly, one were to come back and report, and the other was to stay and help the soldiers if needed. Just as the meeting was about to be dismissed, the imperial edict from heaven reached the palace. Listening to the envoy reading out the change of date regarding the wedding, the faces of the powerful generals all turned black. Suddenly changing the marriage date? Whenever it regards the marriage, heaven just does as they please. In the corner, Shen Li sat quietly, not speaking. The atmosphere was hard for a long time. Finally, it was the demon emperor that broke the silence. This meeting is done, everybody may go. All the generals sighed one after another, and got up to leave. Before he left, Mo Feng turned to look at Shen Li. Her eyes were indifferent, about to leave as well. Suddenly, the demon emperor called out, "Leer, stay behind." Her name ringed with affection, the voice not blaming or pleading. Mo Feng lowered his eyes and left. In the room, only Shen Li and the demon emperor remained. Behind the silver mask, a sad, slightly broken voice sounded, "You, towards Fu Rong, this man, what do you see?" Fu Rong, Fu Rong. Whether rain or dew, as long as they have it, none will be left unstained. Shen Li's voice was thick with disdain, just from the name, you can tell. If he walks in a field of flowers, none will be left untouched. The demon emperor was surprised for a moment. It looks like you already have a thorough understanding of him. Shen Li turned her head, does not dare to. Watching her acting so difficult, the demon emperor knew in his heart that when the edict was read out, although she herself didn't say it out loud, her self-esteem had gotten a terrible blow. He kept silent for a while, before finally speaking again, "Shen Li, do you know who arranged the marriage? Other than that bored, royal family in heaven, then who else? There is also Sir Xingji." The demon emperor's demeanor turned serious, an ancient god living a solitary existence, from heaven, your marriage was bestowed upon you by him. Shen Li was startled. Xingji was like a legend within the three realms. The only living ancient god, who by solely his own power, created heaven's space-time rip, and prevented the three realms from destruction, sealing in the wicked beasts millenniums ago. His strength is unrivaled among the modern gods. But for more than 1,000 years, no one has caught sight of him. In the end, no one knows if he was even real, or just fictional. But suddenly, the demon emperor had just told her that Xingji bestowed her the marriage? Ah, this Xingji, compared to the royal family in heaven, must be even more bored. Shen Li sneered, he must have had no idea who was who, and just picked two random names out of the registry. That stupid guy, taking his words like orders from the realms itself. Her voice was irritated, so to speak, this new date is his doing? Because that heavenly emperor views Xingji with so much respect, he probably doesn't dare to change or do anything about the marriage. If there needs to be a change, at the very least, he still needs to get Xingji's agreement before anything else. What he says is what the heavenly emperor will do. Thinking about her own fate, that could change randomly with a few mere words from someone who hasn't been seen for thousands of years, Shen Li's heart couldn't help but become more and more angry, slamming the table with her fist. He only sealed some domesticated animals inside the space-time rip, yet he's acting so pretentious. He forced me into an arranged marriage. Then, he changed the date of the marriage completely. Does he think that I, Shen Li, is a vegetarian? Lear, sit down. The demon emperor's voice was indifferent. Although her heart was unwilling, she still followed his words, sitting down on the chair. However, her fists were still clenched. Xingji of the Three Realms. His power, not only heaven, but I myself respected as well. Why? Shen Li was dissatisfied. He only waved his hand in heaven's space-time rip, but the work is burdened upon our race to protect the seal for over 1,000 years. Not only that, but he even used marriage to take me away from my own kind. Mentioning this matter, Shen Li grew even more furious, remembering all the things the demonic realms people had been subject to. Why must we obey heaven, follow their every word? My kind soldiers are brave and many. Having to bend to their every will, then might as well slaughter through heaven itself, not allowing them to have another day of peace. Shut your mouth. The demon emperor's manner was grave. Shen Li wanted to continue speaking, but knew in her heart that this time, the demon emperor was truly angry. She didn't want to quarrel with him. Shen Li could only suppress her anger, listening to him talk. You can speak of a war so easily, when Shen Li, you have not gone through a genuine war. Shen Li has fought on the battlefield numerous times, but the battles were always fought against the monster tribes. Rather than saying it was two armies fighting, it was more like a hunt. She could not have a say in something she never experienced. Shen Li unwillingly sat, refusing to acknowledge the demon emperor's words. It was silent. The demon emperor sighed, his palm gently rubbing her head. Go back home. I leave you to calm down, so you can have your tantrum there. I didn't think that I would have made you this aggravated over the marriage. The demon emperor's voice was soft and gentle. Shen Li's heart couldn't hold it back anymore. The corners of her mouth drooped down slowly, a rare, wronged look, similar to ones of a child appearing on her face. Master, I don't want to marry. He remained silent, and rubbed her head. Go home. 1. The Lear is a form of endearment, usually intimate, between family and friends. 2. Basically debauchery. If you don't get it, you can comment below, and I'll get back to ya. Welcome to my channel. This is the audiobook, Accompanying the Phoenix. Chapter 19. Shen Li returned home, passing through the sandy dunes in the Great Hall. Irritated, her foot shot out to kick a small sandpile. Shushu's naked body stared up at her within the sand, near her foot. Shen Li raised an eyebrow as Shushu's mouth rapidly moved. I was ashamed to even see one person. Ah, king. Without feathers, I have never been so ugly. Ah. Good, king. So ruthless, so despicable. Shen Li lifted up her ankle, straightening her spine. Filthy, ah. Say, I've never seen you take a bath before, ah. How would you look, soaked in water? Shushu stayed silent. Shen Li called, Roya. Prepare the water. Ah. King, forgive me. You may drown this subordinate to death. Ah. King. Are you sad, ah? You're venting your anger on Shushu, ah. My fate is in your hands, ah. Cluck, cluck. I must care for you thoroughly. Hearing Shen Li talk so much, Royu was startled, asking, what did the demon emperor say? Haha, it's nothing. King. Really, what happened? Fu Rong and Azure Sky King Shen Li's marriage got postponed. The news circulated out to the public, becoming one of the many gossips discussed by the demon people in their leisure time. But on the 10th day after the news, a letter written with blood has been sent from the boundary, its contents causing all of the demon realm's people to tremble. Heaven's space-time rip seal has been broken. All the criminals sealed within had escaped, only leaving one scorpion-tailed fox, its tail not even completely formed yet. But even so, it had severely damaged the garrison stationed at the border. The general sent by the demon emperor, Zhe Xia, had rushed back desperately to send the news, but was killed on horseback before even arriving at the palace. General Mo Fong remained, tenaciously clinging to border, refusing to let it trample even half a foot of the demon land. It was a military emergency, not allowing even a second for delay. When the demon emperor received the news, he immediately ordered an elaborate for Zhe Xia, and on the side, sent a messenger to inform heaven about the event. At this time, Shen Li, who was discussing official matters within the palace, conveniently heard his orders. She struck the table angrily. Why must we have to inform heaven? While those are discussing outcomes, my demon soldiers are suffering unjustified deaths. Demon Emperor, Shen Li pleads to go to battle. The demon emperor was silent. At this time, there were also 3 old veterans in the room, listening on to the conversation. After considering the duo's points, their representative, the white-haired elder, opened his mouth. Lord, although there are many great and clever generals within the palace, none are more better suited to deal with the miscreants than Shen Li. This subordinate knows that you place much emphasis on Shen Li's unique position in the arranged marriage. However, we are in a time of crisis. This subordinate must request for you to understand the importance of the numerous casualties of brave soldiers defending our borders as well. The demon emperor's finger tapped the table, finally turning his head. Shen Li. Shen Li immediately knelt down, fist cupped in a salute. Present. This January, do not even take half a step out of your palace. Shen Li looked up at him, shocked. By the side, the 3 veterans shared a look with one another, but this time, kept silent. However, Shen Li was unwilling. Demon Emperor. The boundary. The chaos at the borders will be dealt by General Xiangbei. He will go to investigate, and if cannot cut down the fox, will seek help from heaven. O great, powerful, immortal demon emperor! Ha, you really are just a puppet dancing to heaven's tune. Shen Li was furious. Disregarding every aspect of etiquette, she stood up and marched to the door, slamming it on the way out. In the room, it was silent. Finally, the demon emperor broke the silence. 3 veterans. Do you believe that I have made a mistake? One of the veterans sighed. Little King is still young, she cannot understand Lord's good intentions. But Lord, relax your heart. There will always be a part of her who will always know about the Lord's care and love for her. The eyes behind the silver mask was weary. One day, she'll understand. General Zhe Xia's coffin was not yet sealed. Taking the chance, Shen Li took a look. His face was covered with green patterns, and his fingertips were already rotted black. The medical officers had said that this was due to the scorpion-tailed fox's toxin, but with Zhe Xia's skill, it shouldn't have been fatal. But in order to bring this message to the castle, he disregarded his injury, riding back non-stop. This caused the poison within his body to reach his heart, taking away his life. Hearing this, Shen Li clenched her teeth tightly. Her brother, her comrade in arms, had spent his life to bring back this news to the underground demon palace. Yet the result ended in setting up an elaborate funeral for his dead corpse, notifying heaven, sending another squadron to their deaths, all while pleading for heaven's help. There was no way that this is the result Zhe Xia wanted to die for. He used his life, trading it for the fate of the garrisons, by the border. The sooner he could report back, the sooner aid would be sent, the sooner the chance of the monster getting slain. Perhaps then, many, many lives could have been saved. Zhe Xiao's corpse was surrounded by a beautifully placed frame, a smile on his face. Shen Li's fists clenched. She could understand how he must have felt upon reaching the palace, before finally being allowed to die on his horse. His mission was complete, and he was finally relieved of his burden. But the demon emperor. Shen Li ground her teeth. In the chamber, two servants approached, planning to drag the coffin into the center of the room. Suddenly, she felt an urge overtake her as she clenched onto the coffin, refusing to let them to move it. King? Shen Li bit her finger, spattering all over her hand. She slammed her hand on the coffin, leaving bloody fingerprints as she softly muttered, "Shen Li will complete the rest of your mission." Without another word, she turned and left the palace. She returned to her home. When Xu saw her, he sensed danger and immediately ran to hide in his cage. However, Shen Li just grabbed him. Nearby, Roya gasped when she saw how Shen Li was holding Xu roughly by the neck, almost choking him. "King, you cannot, ah. Xu can't breathe. This bird that I have raised is not that weak. Leave, and close the door." Roya looked into Shen Li's eyes, frightened, but finally complied, exiting the room. She closed the door, but she still didn't leave, silently standing behind the door. Before long, Shen Li started speaking. "Today, I am going into retreat. No matter who comes, tell them that I cannot meet with anyone right now." Roya was confused. What to do now? She scratched her head, finally choosing to gather her courage and open the door. She took a quick glance inside, but suddenly felt something next to her foot. Taking a closer look, it was Xu, naked. But for some reason, it seemed far happier than before, jumping up to skip down the hall in high spirits. King didn't do anything to him? Roya pushed the door a little more to look inside, bypassing the screen blocking her. She saw Shen Li meditating, looking exactly as one would be during a retreat. She just intruded on King's retreat. How rude. Roya immediately backed out, closing the door after her. But as she swept the floors, she couldn't find Xu at all. She didn't know that currently, Shen Li had already infiltrated the army, beating down a random soldier and stealing his clothes and his badge before changing her appearance into his. Like that, she had set out to the border. But at this time in the underground demon palace, Qi Rong was kneeling in front of the demon emperor, reporting, "Shen Li has gone to the border, and Qing Yan is tailing behind her." "Demon emperor, do you want her to be brought back?" The one behind the silver mask was silent for a long time before finally sighing. "Just go accompany her." The demon army's speed was fast, but it still took 2 days to reach the border. Although only a small portion of the space-time rip seal has been broken, the miasma emitted from it had already covered the whole borderline. Many of the weaker demon soldiers could only vomit all day long, never mind fight. Even sitting up was difficult. But Mo Feng's leadership was efficient and organized, managing to keep the scorpion-tailed fox more than 10 miles away from the border. But when the army arrived at the battlefield, hearing the roar of the beast even so far away, despite having slain beasts for years, their legs could all not help but tremble. Sure enough, a creature sealed within the space-time rip was no ordinary beast. It was far more powerful. But when Shen Li remembered how Zhe Xia looked like in the coffin, her fists still clenched with anger. "Attention!" General Shang Bei ordered loudly, causing all the reinforcements from the Demon Emperor to hurriedly line up in formation. However, there was one soldier at the very end who did not, instead daring to directly walk up towards him. Upon seeing this, General Xiangbei was furious, for daring to disobey military orders, 30 hits with a rod. Shen Li took off the heavy helmet over her face and raised her head to look at him, General Xiangbei. Shen Li is bold, and wishes to join the borderline battle. King? Seeing her, the army was in a huge commotion. Here, they have to chance to battle, side by side, with the Azure Sky King herself, in flesh. They have only heard of her name, but anyone would know that the Azure Sky King is invincible. In a mere moment, their spirits soared as their morale rose to a sudden high. Although Xiangbei was glad the morale was high, he also knew that Shen Li was about to be married. Moreover, the Demon Emperor didn't allow her to come out to battle, and as a soldier of the Demon Emperor, he must keep Demon Emperor in mind at all times. King, the Demon Emperor has refused to let you go to battle. This little subordinate does not dare have the courage to. Before he could finish his words, Shen Li interrupted, General, since Shen Li is already here, I will not go back without bringing the head of the beast first. Within 3 days, this king will have the beast under my foot. Hearing such bold remarks, the army was silent. For a moment, Xiangbei was also silent. Suddenly, he flicked the reins in his hands, unsheathing his sword valiantly, prepare to set out. Shen Li and Xiangbei rode side by side. Many thanks to General for allowing Shen Li to participate in this war. King, if this subordinate had chosen not to allow you to join the war, what would you have done? Knock you out, take charge of your army, and go to execute the beast. Xiangbei smiled bitterly, exactly. The more they moved forward, the thicker the miasma. The roars grew louder, causing many of the soldiers to stare in shock and fear. Breaking through the miasma, the reinforcement team finally saw the monster, clashing ferociously against Mo Feng. Its body was huge, resembling one of a fox. However, the tail was one of a scorpion's, waving viciously high in the air. Just a mere glance of the huge, poisonous barb on the end of its tail caused fear. When it caught sight of the reinforcements, it opened its mouth, roared, flashing sharp, bloody, red fangs. They were like the edges of a saw, teeth lined up in a zigzag-like pattern. The saliva dripped into the earth, turning the sand and gravel into thick, greasy slop. The remains of Mo Feng's army were covered with blood, utterly exhausted. Only Mo Feng continued to fight, facing it alone. Xiangbei roared loudly, to war. Before he even shouted, Shen Li had already grasped her hanging spear and flew forward. Shouting loudly, she threw the hanging spear, landing straight onto the middle of the fox's head. The harsh magical power reached inside the brain, causing the scorpion-tailed fox to hiss loudly at the sky in pain. The barbed scorpion tail shot directly at Shen Li, who immediately pulled out her spear and twisted around, meeting the barb with her spear. Adding force behind her spear, Shen Li directly chopped off the sharp-tipped barb on the scorpion-tailed fox's tail. It screeched loudly, almost breaking the eardrums of everybody present. It stumbled around in a dazed state, its claw nearly landing on Mo Feng. Shen Li dived downwards at him, pushing Mo Feng into the air, making him land 30 feet away. Shen Li's feet stood firm on the ground as she squatted, wielding her spear up. The moment the fox was about to land on her, she thrust it up, piercing straight through the paw pad. But in this moment, the foul blood that spilled out dyed Shen Li red. The distraction managed to let the scorpion-tailed fox to retreat safely, albeit defeated. Behind her, Mo Feng stared at Shen Li, King. Shen Li turned her head to look at him. She could see that his battle armor was shattered, face covered with blood. She stared into the distance. The reinforcement soldiers were rescuing their comrades around the globs of earth. But still, it was impossible to know how many soldiers were buried under the greasy globs, the number of cold bodies sunken below them. Shen Li bit her lip. Her hands that were clenching the spear had already turned white. I'm sorry. I'm too late. Welcome to my channel. This is the audiobook, Accompanying the Phoenix. Chapter 20. The scorpion-tailed fox's pupils zoomed on Shen Li, following her every move. Each breath he took, his fur trembled with pain. Suddenly, its body tensed up tightly, the wound healing gradually in the process. Shen Li's eyes flashed with shock. Her hanging spear had drank innumerable amounts of blood in battle, causing its bloodthirst to become terrifyingly strong. If a common demon were to be stabbed with it, the healing process would be incredibly slow. But this one... King, careful. Behind her, Mo Fong urgently reminded her. You could only see the demonic beast's tail swing viciously, smashing towards Shen Li. Although the barb on the end has been cut off, the remainder of the tail was still hard and powerful. Shen Li's gaze sharpened. Her empty hand reached out and she shouted lowly. Above, the scorpion tail that was about to smash into her had exploded, thick, corrosive toxins spattering out as well in the sky. Shen Li's hand waved, her magical powers mutating into a strong wind. The poison that was about to land on the soldiers below were scattered by the breeze. Ha, 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 ha. The scorpion-tailed fox suddenly faced the sky and laughed, its throat somehow producing a human-like voice. Shen Li frowned. The closer a beast is to a human, the more powerful it will be. Fighting against someone whose body that unleashes corrosive toxins and has extremely strong healing abilities in poisonous miasma. This will certainly be a long and thorny war. Not bothering to wait for Shen Li to figure out the meaning of his laugh, the ambiguous voice once more rumbled in the fox's throat. I did not expect for the current demonic realm to actually have such a good seedling. If you were to be given more time, you surely would have become a great talent. Such a pity that you do not have much more time. Just then, Shen Li had moved forward a step and stabbed the spear into the large paw in front of her. However, the stabbed paw held no scars or wound visible at all. Its neck stretched forwards, inhaling a large mouthful of the miasma. His head was raised high in delight, as if savoring a delicious meal. His fierce eyes became blood red, howling out a loud cry. The sound grew higher and higher, becoming as sharp as a knife. The soldiers all fell to the floor, their eardrums piercing with unbearable pain as they clutched their ears, groaning. At the same time, the wound on his head that Shen Li had stabbed earlier healed completely. On his tail, the decapitated barb regrew at a slow, but noticeable pace. His ash-gray fur made popping noises, the muscle underneath strengthening as it expanded. His body was even bigger now. Shen Li clenched her teeth, but listened to Mo Fong calling behind her, King, take note that the beast has made use of the toxic miasma. Its self-recovery is far better and it can absorb its opponent's strength. Hearing what Mo Fong had said, all the soldiers were startled. The fatal wound that Shen Li had dealt earlier was nothing but some free power for it to absorb. She frowned. You really know how to make a person irritated, ah. The hanging spear shook in her hands, and Shen Li leaned her head slightly sideways. General Shangbei. Assist the charge. General Shangbei was shocked, but quickly recovered and ordered loudly, formation. The army immediately moved into action. The beast's blood-red eyes swiveled around, wanting to judge the whereabouts of the soldiers. However, Shen Li actually leaped on top of him, obstructing his sight. Her spear swept across his two eyes only to hear a loud ding, instead. It was the scorpion-tailed fox's newly formed barb, and had blocked Shen Li's spear, the collision sparking a loud ding. But this time, the scorpion-tail barb remained intact and undamaged. Her magical powers were currently far less than earlier, and her level of her powers were equivalent to her fighting strength. With so little, Shen Li naturally wasn't strong enough to have an even fight. Therefore, Shen Li immediately bit the bullet and led the charge personally. If she could the other men an opening, even for a moment, it will be sufficient. 3 crossbow bolts immediately shot out, each with a long iron chain trailing behind them. They flew in the air, landing squarely embedded in the scorpion-tailed fox's back. The sharp, heavy arrow dug deep into its flesh, reaching its bones. If it were to charge, its bones would have been directly tugged out from within its body. The 3 adjacent powers all pulled, restraining the monster until it could no longer move. An opening has been revealed. Now, the only thing left is to cut off the head. In the air, Shen Li still hadn't had the chance to move before the scorpion-tailed fox sneered, "It's been thousands of years, but these battle formations unexpectedly still haven't changed." In her heart, Shen Li felt a bad premonition. The beast's body shifted, planning to stake it all, but suddenly he hissed with pain. One of his bones were slowly pulled out, and as it did, his hiss slowly turned into an angry roar as his tail flicked from side to side. But one of the triangle formation's 3 hooks were broken, no longer able to contain the fox. Now it was able to move around free, do as he likes. If he were to try and deal a killing blow now, the situation won't be good. By the time Shen Li regained her thoughts, it was too late. In a blink of an eye, his tail that was swinging side to side spat out poison, dripping over the battlefield. With her left hand, Shen Li pushed back the soldiers who were holding the chain out of harm's way. The soldiers knew that if they were to get hit by the poison, they inevitably would suffer a cruel death. However, they were still somewhat unwilling to let go of the iron chains that bound the beast. With her right hand, Shen Li stabbed the honeying spear between the shackles binding the fox, the chain twisting around her spear. Using the spear like an anchor, she ruthlessly plunged it deep into the earth. Her actions were done with great speed, but before she could completely finish, the barb on the scorpion-tailed fox's tail plunged towards her right before her eyes. But just before it was about to pierce through her, a figure charged in and pushed her to the side, saving her. "Mo Fong?" Shen Li stared at him in shock. After fighting alone for several days, Mo Fong was utterly exhausted. His body held who knows how many wounds, but the only thing echoing in his mind was to save Shen Li, the only force driving him forward. Hearing her voice, knowing she was safe, Mo Fong's heart was content. Just knowing of Shen Li made him feel at ease, but suddenly, his back was filled with immeasurable pain. Turning his head to take a look, he suddenly understood why the normally calm Shen Li was so frantic. The scorpion-tailed fox had once again attacked down with his stinger, and pierced his back with the barbed stinger, almost penetrating through his shoulder blades. Unexpectedly was wounded. Not aware. Seemingly lost all of his remaining energy, Mo Fong's eyes closed. Shen Li felt her body turn cold. She remembered Zhe Xia, his body cold and lifeless as he laid in the coffin. She looked around, turning her body. The sandy soil was covered by corpses, broken corpses of the army. These people, somewhere in the demonic realm, they had a home, with family eagerly awaiting their safe return. Just like that old woman in the human realm, waiting year by year, hope in their hearts. But now, they can no longer return home. Shen Li looked at the barb, once again regrowing into another sharp tip, pitch-black eyes gradually turning red. They all couldn't go back, all because of this damned beast that escaped from the space-time rip. This sin, it must be paid with 1,000 deaths. Shen Li gently pushed Mo Fong's body, "Withdraw." The word fell out from her mouth. The sound wasn't loud, but like waves of water, spread through around the wicked beast and reached Xiangbei, who didn't hesitate in the slightest and immediately called, "Withdraw." The soldiers all rushed to follow the orders. Seeing this, the beast started to laugh. We've all submitted to that useless emperor, that emperor who was no more than a puppet of heavens. It's been 1,000 years, but he's only gotten more foolish. It'll be best for him to die just in my stomach. You have disrespected my emperor and slaughtered my soldiers. Her cold voice suddenly echoed in its ear, you have angered me. The scorpion-tailed fox's head reared, its poisonous saliva flying into the air. Shen Li made a grabbing motion with her hand, and the spear that was binding the chains moved. It flew in an arc, landing in Shen Li's hands, who spun it around to block all the spit. She brandished it, golden light flaring from the spear. Xiangbei was stunned, hurriedly shouting, King! Stay calm. That demonic beast can absorb your magic power for his own use. Shen Li sneered, good, ah. Her figure flashed, reappearing suddenly on the scorpion-tailed fox's back, her hanging spear stabbing downwards into the already made wound of the crossbow bolts. Try to absorb this. Harsh, barbarian-like power surged through the spear tip, golden light piercing its body through the abdomen all the way down to the soil underneath, causing the scorpion-tailed fox to roar madly in pain. Shen Li could hear the hanging spear drink, unexpectedly even wanting to drain it dry. But while the golden light surged in, Shen Li's magical powers grew weaker and weaker, until it was completely consumed. In return, the beast's muscles swelled, healing at an unbelievable pace. Standing on its back, Shen Li had a very clear view as everything happened. It was so fast that Shen Li's spear was almost stuck inside the flesh. Ha 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 ha. The scorpion-tailed fox laughed, a child still stinking of breast milk dares to try and attack me. Its jaws opened wide as its head turned back, red eyes looking at Shen Li. At the same time, the scorpion-tailed barb waved in front of her. Shen Li was forced back a few steps, but suddenly, the area above her head became dark as the stench of rotting flesh snuck into her nostrils. She could only see the scorpion-tailed fox's bloody teeth, venomous saliva swimming inside his mouth. Suddenly, the world turned black. King! Xiangbei exclaimed. The soldiers' hearts almost stopped beating. Azure Sky King. The invincible Azure Sky King had just got eaten. The body of the scorpion-tailed fox grew larger as it let out an extremely carefree and happy cry. It was loud and long, scaring the soldiers immensely, ha ha ha. When I free my fellow brothers, we will surely restore the demonic realm glory. Ha ha ha. Suddenly, its voice screeched to a stop. Its body shook violently as if some sudden pain appeared inside his body. Soon, its shaking grew more and more berserk. Watching its body tremor with such force, all the soldiers stared, shocked and confused. Xiangbei's gaze fell onto the throat of the scorpion-tailed fox, and saw the skin suddenly swell dramatically as its toes curling tightly in pain, its tail waving madly. At this moment, the hanging spear that was still stuck in its back suddenly disappeared, and its throat suddenly glowed with a burst of golden light. Everybody watched, golden light tearing through the flesh as it glowed frightfully. The scorpion-tailed fox's mouth opened, yet was unable to produce even a single sound, apparently due to the ferocious battle against the golden light. Finally, the hanging spear pierced through the neck area. Golden light gathered suddenly, and one could only hear a loud boom, before the giant head was cut off from the inside, tumbling to the ground. But what also came out was a woman, clothes bathed in blood. Her body was coated with blood and unknown liquids, the hairband tying her hair, broken, her long hair down and loose. The killing intent around her still didn't disperse. Her sharp footsteps echoed as she approached the scorpion-tailed fox's head slowly, contempt in her eyes. Within the miasma, that pair of bloody red eyes stared in terror. No. And no, this is impossible, the scorpion-tailed fox's mouth still moved. No one told you? Shen Li's foot stepped on its nose. You cannot just eat things randomly. The hanging spear pierced into the middle of its forehead. Its eyes rolled white. Before dying, his mouth still twitched, obviously. Just a small girl. Before he left the world, he stared into Shen Li's eyes, that were still glowing with a red light, suddenly shocked like he just became aware of something, formerly. Unexpectedly, it was like this. His eyes closed. Shen Li withdrew the spear and pointed it up at the sky. The wicked beast has been executed. For a moment, the world was quiet, followed by the outbreak of a loud cry, Azure Sky King. Azure Sky King. But no matter how loud the men cheered, Shen Li couldn't hear any of them. In her eyes, the world was blurry. She only subconsciously turned around, wanting to go to the other side. But by the cheering soldiers, there was also a white figure, within the heavy mist, quietly staring at her. Xingyun. She took a single, difficult step towards in that direction, not even noticing when she let the hanging spear fall to the floor. Each step she took, a bloody trail followed. Everyone saw her hand was broken, cheeks burned by the venom. It was silent, as everybody watched her slowly walk in that direction, that one which Shen Li walked as they all silently paved the road clear for her. Shen Li wasn't aware of anything else but the road she walked. The crimson glow slowly faded from her eyes. Besides that figure in white, she couldn't see anything else. In this battlefield, she is turned into an empty fairyland, only he is what can lead her out. Xingyun. Shen Li struggled to lift her hand, fingertips touching warm skin. She brought a bloody fingertip, wiping a red streak through his fair, clear face. She seemed to hear sounds coming from the outside, somebody smiling gently and say to her, Shen Li, time to eat. N. She wanted to eat the food he makes. She missed him. Her fingers slid down, her body falling into a warm embrace. Although there wasn't the smell of herbs, it was equally warm.